geez. Yeah. Just a lot of meetings.
Oh, this is the bill list.
We have to talk about this a lot. Right after the meeting. Do we have a liquor license thing in there for that?
Down, that's the bill list.
Where, that way?
That away. Those fellas and lady. Just to the mayor. Walking home. My lunch.
Sorry, do we have a follow-up on a... Follow-up on a liquor license? Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Would everyone please stand for a short prayer and a salute to our flag? Almighty God, grant us the wisdom to make those decisions that are in the best interest of all our residents. May the Heavenly Father of us all bless those who have given the ultimate sacrifice and service to our nation, and may He watch over and protect our servicemen and women now guarding the gates of freedom. Before the Pledge of Allegiance, I'll ask that everyone observe a moment of silence for 9/11 and the tragedy and the attack that happened 16 years ago today. Our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Approval of the prior minutes of the mayor and council.
Mayor, I need to take...
Oh, I'm sorry. Statement of publication.
Thank you, Mayor. Take notice that this regular meeting of the Mayor and Borough Council being held on this 11th day of September 2017 has been advertised and posted in accordance with Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975.
Roll call.
Councilpersons Buchanan.
Here.
Grillo.
Here.
Kilpatrick.
Here.
Lembo. Melendez.
Here.
Novak.
Here.
Okay, approval of the prior minutes. Council President.
Mayor, I move the following minutes be approved, subject to correction. The June 26, 2017 special meeting and executive session, June 26, 2017 council session, and the July 24, 2017 regular agenda and executive sessions.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. At this moment, I'm gonna call up Rich Kosmowski to the front.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Rich Kosmowski, Wilson Avenue, Parlin, and I'm here tonight to representing the American Legion Lenape Post 211 Honor Guard. I'd like to formally invite our elected officials to attend our 6th annual Vietnam Veterans Remembrance Ceremony. That will be held on Sunday, October 15th, 2017, promptly starting at 5 p.m. The ceremony will be held at the American Legion Post Home on MacArthur Avenue, rather than at the Veterans Monuments in front of Borough Hall. It is being held at the Post Home due to the negative comments made by council members when it was held in front of the Borough Hall 2 years ago. The veterans took offense to the questions being asked after the fact as to, did you hold a ceremony on borough property? As if we needed your permission or offended someone. Veterans should never need to ask your permission to conduct any type of solemn military ceremony on a borough property. Maybe you need to be reminded that the borough property is not yours, but belongs to every resident in Saraville. How soon we forget that the veterans are the ones who gave you the freedom of speech and the privilege to govern in the best interests of Saraville, along with the American way of life. The Vietnam Remembrance Ceremony that we conduct is to pay tribute to our 8 local boys who paid the ultimate sacrifice with their lives so that we can continue to enjoy the American way of life. As a past commander and co-chairman of the Saraville Veterans Alliance for the past 20 years, and master of ceremonies of the American Legion Honor Guard military services during that period, I will never request nor seek your permission to conduct military services on borough property. As wartime veterans, we earned that privilege by defending the freedoms of our country and our community with our lives. Comments you make toward or about our veterans, especially those that I have referred to, have negative connotations and are not forgotten by our veterans because they are hurtful to all veterans. Mr. Mayor, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rich. It's a sad day in Saraville. With that being said, I'd ask Rob Delicat to come up.
My name is Bob Delicat. I live on 10 Little Broadway, Saraville. And I'm just here to say one thing. I served my time in the service. I lost a couple of my good friends that I went to school with. And I don't see why there's no recognition that we can't have any of our stuff here on the property of Saraville, New Jersey. I've been born and raised in this town. And first of all, Mary, you know your husband is a decorated veteran. And why is this brought up? I have no reason why. We shouldn't have to ask for permission. We live here. I've been a member for VFW and for the American Legion for over 40 years. Why should we have to go through this?
You shouldn't.
No, we shouldn't have to.
Shouldn't.
Mr. Delicat, Mr. Delicat, who said that you couldn't have anything on here?
This was brought up in 2015, just like Rich Kosmusky had said. That's what happened.
Recollect anybody saying
And
that?
this is what I want to take place of.
Somebody had approached me and told me that they had spoken to you.
Right.
And I actually went back and looked at the tapes. I was really astounded because in 2016, you still had the service out here because
That's correct.
I received an invitation.
Right.
So why 2 years later, this is a problem, I don't really know, except for the fact that I'm running this year.
Well, the one thing I want to know is who do we have to send a permission slip to who to have something
don't.
for our veterans?
You don't.
It's my
don't.
understanding you don't have to have anything.
Okay. Well, something happened there, but all I want to say is right now is one thing. God bless America, and thank the veterans that were out there to help you people so you live happy and friendly.
Rich,
Thank
thank
you.
you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Eddie Streck.
Ed Streck, 58 Nickel Avenue, Saraville. Mary, that particular service wasn't in 2016. It was in 2015.
I know, but in 2016, you did have the service out
We
here
did
because I
have the
received
service.
the invitation.
That's true.
Okay, so you knew
reas-
that there
the
wasn't
reason
a
it-
problem.
The reason this topic is being brought up again is that we, at our September membership meeting of the American Legion, and the majority of our members are distinguished Vietnam veterans. The question came up, what happened in 2015, and we explained what actually happened. I believe Mr. McGill was a councilman,
Yes.
and I happened to be at that meeting, and I took abuse for that whole meeting from the council. All they wanted to know is why weren't they invited? The Public Works Department knew. The Public Works Department cleaned the front of the Borough Hall. The Public Works Department supplied us with the sound system. Mayor, you were there. Council Rittenhouse was there. So it was posted on the Access Channel. Everybody knew about the service. So there was no excuse for the council to blame me that they weren't invited to a service. I'm also a Vietnam veteran. I didn't serve in country, but my whole family served in the military. My entire family. And the comment that Mrs. Novak made, were they on borough property, is still brought up at our Legion meetings.
Mr. Streck, I didn't make that comment.
You
should
most
listen to the
certainly
tape.
did.
No, I did not.
You most certainly did.
No, I did not.
Yes, you did.
Watch the tape because I just watched it the other
wasn't the
night.
2016 meeting.
2015 meeting.
You most certainly did.
I did
was
not,
at the
Mr.
meeting.
Streck. My comment was, does the Legion need permission? I was a Girl Scout leader for years, and every time I wanted to do anything, I had to write a letter, asking permission. I asked a question, and I immediately said, I would have been there had I known about it. Because Ed, who's been there December 7th for 20 years?
I know, Mary. I know.
And
I
Memorial
also-
Day, I go to the
also know your
cemeteries
husband. Your
to
husband is a
say-
decorated
To
Vietnam
say that
veteran.
I would anyway hurt the veterans is really quite offensive to me.
Well, here's
It
what's
really
gonna
is.
Well, this is what's going to happen. Now,
You
November.
you had your service there last year.
We did.
If there was such a problem, why is it coming
Last
up
year,
this year?
I believe we had the service in the post home last year. We didn't have it in front of the Borough Hall last year.
Okay.
It was at the post home. Mayor attended. Councilman Krillos attended. I don't think any other.
No, I responded to
borough-
you. I responded to you that I would be away in Vermont.
You
I
didn't
did.
respond to me. You
Oh.
might have responded to the post, but you didn't respond
Whoever
to me.
sent the letter, because I received an invitation and I responded to that
don't-
I would
I
be on
don't-
vacation.
I don't really know if a letter was sent out.
Well,
because I'm only
I
the color-
received one.
I'm only the color guard captain. But this November 11th, Veterans Day, the services will not be held in front of the Borough Hall. The services are going to be held on one of the local cemeteries. We're going to be honoring a World War I veteran. We haven't decided who it is, but the service will not be in front of the Borough Hall. That'll be at 11 o'clock, and you will probably be notified of that service. But we'd like a little more respect. And this was brought up at one of our Legion meetings. This just wasn't me or any of it came up. So there was a discussion, and this is how the membership of American Legion feels. And
Well, I'm sorry they feel that way because I would never disrespect a veteran, and you know that.
I know that, but it's what was said. And sometimes words mean a lot. And it meant a lot to the Vietnam veterans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for your service, and I hope time will heal this slight. With that being said, I'm going to ask Karen Bailey and Art Rittenhouse to come up.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My
Karen,
name,
identify yourself if
I
you would,
was
please.
getting to that. My name is Karen Bailey. I live on 279 Johnson Lane in Portland, section of Sayreville. I've been a lifelong resident here all my life, and I had an idea a couple of weeks ago. I had an idea that maybe if we could fill a 53-foot tractor trailer and send it to Texas, that might be a great project for us. And I had to first secure a trailer and a driver. And with that, yes, I made my next calls, and we're in the process of doing that. We kicked off the project today. in front of the 277 Johnson's Lane at Buddy's Tavern. We have the trailer parked there. We got permission from the Board of Education to utilize that grassy area on the side. The schools and are definitely participating with us. We had dropped off boxes today, and we're looking to collect donations of like baby items, personal hygiene products, water, food, non-perishable food, new towels, washcloths, linens, and new clothing. And if anyone can make a monetary contribution, because we need gasoline to get there for the truck. So I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and those who have heard about this and received this so well. We really appreciate it. This is a combined, there's no way this can get done by one person. And it's been so amazing, the reception that the town, that the mayor has given us, the council, the assemblyman, the Senator Vitale. It's just been incredibly amazing to have the opportunity to do something for unity and for all of us, and to show, again, how we are Sayreville strong for our neighbors in Texas. So the project is going to go on till the 23rd of September, and then we are going to leave on about October 1st with the goods. I have spoke to the San Antonio Food Bank, who is going to receive everything that we discussed at the meeting that we had last Wednesday, to get some ideas together and some things that might be received, and they're going to receive everything that I had just named. So we have also several locations around the borough that have agreed to house a public donation area besides the trailer. The Borough Hall is doing it, the Senior Center, the Morgan First Aid Squad, the United Methodist Church, Sayreville Day we're going to be at, and the Assemblyman John Wisniewski's office. And I want to again thank you guys and ask if there's any way, if we need some of the stuff moved from the senior centers, and if we don't have the mobility or the means to do it, if there's any way maybe a borough
Jen,
truck
do
thing.
you see any problem in this? Okay.
Thank you. So thank you guys very much for listening. And,
Now, one of the things, Karen, Arthur, did you bring something we can put on the website? Also, I was going to ask you to ask Jason to do a short film clip, and we'll put it on the cable channel. Have him bring the camera down to the truck so that people know what they're looking for.
I didn't mention, and the wonderful youth in this town, they are really coming up to the plate. We have the high schoolers. I have a student, Caitlin Hockham, who's organizing the high school volunteers who are coming from the different sports teams or clubs, and they are going to facilitate, like, helping people get the stuff and items out of their car. And then I have adults that are up in the trailer. We're sorting everything right out there. We had watermelon boxes donated and pallets and things that would, so that we can just put it right in and ship it. And then the schools are going to bring the stuff over, and we're going to sort it out and
I
get
think
it
it's
on
going
the
to be
spot.
very successful, and it's going to be absolutely successful because it's from your heart.
Oh, thank you
So
so much,
thank you,
Mayor.
Karen.
Thank you. We're all part of that Bridge to Peace, and I thank you guys for helping. And you're all invited to come celebrate with us on the 23rd, which will be the final day, and it's going to be in the hall at Buddy's Tavern, and we're going to have a taste of the town, and we are going to try to raise some funds for gasoline, so that we definitely need. But thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
Excuse me, what time on the 20? I'm sorry. What time on the 23rd? 2 to 4. Okay.
2 to 6. Yeah, on the 23rd, if there's any, I'm Art Rittenhouse, 33 Delacat Lane. If there's any restaurants, delis that wish to participate, contact either Karen or I, and the people will have a chance to try out the food of the different restaurants. From the high school, we also have our new ROTC, which will be sending some of the students down and working at the trailer. And I have copies of the locations around town.
You'd give that to Terry so
Right.
she can give it
And
to
also
the
Father
webmaster.
Ken and Father Ryan have both announced that Masses on Sunday. Pastor Vincent from Sayreville United Methodist, and if any of the other churches want to get involved, I know also Sacred Heart and St. Mary's in South Amboy. So it's a true community effort. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Arthur.
Thank
There'll
you
be
for
some-
spearheading
There'll be
this.
some brochures in the back for people if they want them.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Next item of business, Terry?
Mayor, this is a reintroduction of withdrawn ordinance from the August 21st meeting. Reintroduction of ordinance number 363-17, an ordinance of the Borough of Saraville, County of Middlesex, State of New Jersey, to supplement and amend Chapter 35 entitled Affordable Housing Ordinance to implement the Borough of Saraville's Housing Plan Element and Fair Share Plan.
Okay.
Need someone to move the introduction?
Who's introducing this? Planning and zoning?
So this is the second reading.
No, this is the first reading. This is being reintroduced.
Okay. I move the ordinance be approved on first reading, advertised according to law, and a public hearing be held on September 25th.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Motion made and seconded. Roll call.
Councilpersons Buchanan?
It doesn't go to the,
I'm sorry, Councilman Lembo?
No.
Councilman Buchanan?
with comment, first, I would like to see that we go to the stricter standards for the town. The setbacks and the bulk items go to the stricter standard. I'm going to vote yes so that it gets to public comment, so that the public can have a portion as well. I know they've been coming to the meetings and discussing it, but they could actually come and discuss the ordinance now as well. So I'm going to vote yes with those comments.
Grillo?
With comment, I'm going to echo what Councilman Buchanan said. Many residents have reached out to myself and my colleagues via email regarding the higher bulk standards, and we've received information and correspondences from the Borough Planner, John Leon Cavello, so I'm going to vote yes and concur with Councilman Buchanan.
Kilpatrick?
With comment, first I'd like to thank Leon Cabello for listening to us at our last council meeting after Mr. Grillo and I finally got the motion to move forward to have these standards looked at. However, upon reviewing these recent information that was sent to us by our planner, I still believe that there is improvement to be made under this bulk standards. I do believe that there's opportunity here to increase what is currently on this ordinance. In addition to one particular line that actually states in your report that changes in some of these bulk standards could actually lead the possibility of some of these affordable units or even an entire site to be moved from either the Kaplan 1 or the Kaplan 2 site someplace else to another more desirable area. I will vote yes to move this from first reading to give the opportunity to the public to come up and once again speak their mind on behalf of this. As Mr. Grillo has stated, I have received to date probably about 55 or more emails within the past couple of months regarding this issue. I thank every resident. I'm a little slow with responding because I want to make sure that everybody hears exactly my thoughts when I respond. So I will be voting yes only to move this forward for discussion. Unless these changes are made, I will continue to vote no on any and all ordinances moving forward in relation to it. Thank you.
Melendez?
With comment, I'm agreeing with Council President Buchanan. We do need stricter standards with bulk. However, I think we do need to get this to public hearing, and I believe that will be September 25th. So with that, I'm going to vote yes.
Novak?
Yes, with comment. Like everybody else, I know that to get the public's input, we have to get it to that phase. I have not been in favor of this all along, and should things not change drastically in this ordinance, I'll be voting no when it comes up for final reading. But yes for tonight to get it to second reading.
Introduction of the following ordinance, ordinance number 366B-17, an ordinance supplementing and amending Article 3 of Chapter 26, 26, Land Development of the Revised General Ordinances of the Borough of Saraville to permit inclusionary multifamily dwellings within the planned residential development district option.
Is there a motion?
Planning and zoning. That's mine. I move the ordinance be approved on first reading, advertised according to law, and a public hearing be held on September 25th.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Lembo,
No?
Buchanan,
Yes.
Grillo,
Yes.
Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Melendez,
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Mayor, if I may, just ask Terry, or Mike, we also have the fee ordinance somewhere in limbo right now. We didn't put it on hold. We just said, we put it on hold. We didn't put it was originally introduced a couple months ago. How does that get back onto the table?
That ordinance was withdrawn at the last meeting, and Mr. Sachs had said that it had not been discussed and moved back to the council at the last meeting also.
So Mr. Sachs will bring it back at that point.
So the planning board has to recommend it back to the council.
Is that really what, I'm sorry, I misunderstood then. Because I thought that all four of the ordinances were pulled for the same reason.
No, the two ordinances that you're adopting now were required by the court. The other two were recommended by Mr. Sachs, and I think Mr. Leon Cavella to withdraw for the time being, correct? Mr. Leon Cavella?
Yes, I believe so. From Mr. Sachs telling me that the only bill was going on.
Okay.
Right.
Do you know why it's still at the planning board for the fee ordinance? Have they discussed it?
The magnitude of importance for these two ordinances in accordance with Judge.
Did they discuss it at their last meeting, the fee ordinance?
No, we didn't.
So it wasn't discussed, and it's back on the planning board's table.
I'll check on that for the mayor and council
Whether or not it
tomorrow.
was actually discussed at the planning board meeting, I can't comment on that. I just know that that's what,
I'll check tomorrow. I know
Can I
Mr.
just
Mr.
make a comment on
Mr.
this?
Sachs was,
This is kind of important.
his daughter got married, so I'll follow
Understood.
up with him during the week.
Can I just make I just want to make sure here, because I have a problem with this.
So do I.
Two ordinances that are not reappearing here tonight. One is the developer's fee, which is where you charge developers that aren't putting in affordable housing units on projects going on right now. Of all the ordinances that were to be that should have been adopted probably 10 or 20 years ago, it should have been that one. Because that one allows us to turn around and collect monies from developers that are coming in and being allowed to not put in affordable housing. That allows us to then turn around later on when we have to put affordable housing in some place to use that monies to finance these projects. You go to any other town or many other towns around here, they've been doing developers' fees for years and years and years, including the town of East Brunswick, which I'm surprised that Mr. Sachs, and he's celebrating, and I don't want to turn around and say something without him here, but I did ask this question the other day, last meeting, where he practiced, and East Brunswick has been doing this for years and years and years. And considering that that is his practice, that is where he lives, I would think that he would want to have that same type of fee being done here for us a long time ago. So I don't know why that one by the planning board is not being given as much weight and as much time to come back to us, because that's a no-brainer. That's a yes vote all across the board here. The second one, which is even more baffling to me, is the accessory apartment ordinance, if I'm correct. Now, the accessory apartment ordinance, we actually have credits in our housing element plan to get credit for accessory apartments. How do we take credit for something that we currently don't even acknowledge exists? Because the ordinance isn't here. Does that make sense to everybody? Because it doesn't make sense to me. We're getting credit for something. No, this isn't a question to
we
you.
weren't
It's
talking
not
to
a
you,
question
Chair.
to you. So I don't understand. What I'm being told is that the only thing that gets precedence here and has to come before us is what the judge orders us to do. That turns around and gets shoved down our throat, but the two things here that would be beneficial to the town have not come before us, is not being discussed now at the planning board, and those are the two smartest things to put through.
And you know, I agree with you, Councilwoman, and I'll make sure that these
Thank you.
ordinances are brought up on the 25th.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have a question. This is for Mr. Dupont, and please stop me if I'm treading too closely to litigation. But we've received correspondence that there have been 2 additional interveners who have applied for their intervener rights. I don't quite understand how they can do it at this late juncture because another intervener was denied. Could you explain that to the governing
Yeah, you
body?
know
I think
what?
we all have a legal
Well,
question on that.
I guess the issue is that the interveners without, the motion is presently scheduled for Friday, so I don't want to go too into it. And Mr. Sachs has filed oppositions to it. They are simply saying that due to some changes within the Fair Share Housing Plan, and pursuant to the recommendations of our planner, that they feel that they should intervene.
Wait.
One is
Our planner recommended they intervene?
No,
Oh.
I didn't say that. I
I
said
thought that's what you
there-
just said.
No, that's not what I said. I said to the revisions that were recommended. So with that being said, you have 2 interveners. You have National Lead and you have Sarah. And without getting into too much, be it may that National Lead is saying that, hey, look, they want to participate and they want to be part of the Fair Share Housing Plan. And Sarah is saying basically the same thing. So without going into the legal arguments, which is presently scheduled for Friday, I think that kind of summarizes the motions.
Thank you. And would you be able to provide a written memo at the conclusion of that hearing?
Yeah, you know what, as soon as I get this, the court was presently scheduling at 3 o'clock on Friday. I do not know if it has been adjourned, but when I receive all the information from it, I'll certainly do a memo to the mayor and council.
Thank you. That's all,
Mr.
Mayor.
Dupont, can I ask a question? It's just in general relating to interveners and intervener rights. In order to be an intervener, do you have to actually own the property that you are looking to develop in order to file as an intervener?
You know what, there are rights as outlined in the rules associated with how you can intervene and what rights you have. You certainly have to indicate the right that you have to the property. And those rights can be challenged as to whether legitimate or not. That being said, the rules are pretty particular as to who can intervene, when they can intervene, and some of the comments that you had mentioned regarding time, regarding rights, all those will be addressed by the court.
Right. So maybe I don't know. I'm having a hard time. I've been trying to get answers to interveners' rights and things like this.
The
for
reality
quite a
is
while.
that this is at the discretion of the court.
So the court can decide whether someone can be an intervener, whether or not they own the property they're looking to develop?
The court, it's in its discretion. There are certain deadlines that have to be met. There are certain requirements that have to be met under the rules. And then the court, in its infinite wisdom, will either deny or approve of the intervening.
I'll digest that for a while,
Okay.
and then I might have another
I'll be
question.
here for a bit.
Mr. Dupont, I have a question. Should, for some reason, the judge now allow these other interveners, would then the one that has been denied, because they said he was too late, be then allowed to come in and intervene too?
You know what, there's a legal term called res judicata. And so that person would have to raise something new, because the borough could simply point back to the old order and say, well, wait a minute, Judge, he's not brought up, or he or she or the entity has not brought up anything new since the order denial
Yeah, but
3
they-
months ago, 4 months ago, so
It
deny it
was
again.
it was my understanding that he was denied strictly because he was too late to intervene.
And again, that's the res judicata argument, saying, hey, listen, this person was denied once before, and there's nothing new. And so it's
Well,
kind of,
something new would be that we now allowed somebody else that was late to intervene.
Again, and that's
That would
where-
be something new.
well, again, though, the discretion of the court comes in, and all those deadlines come in, and all the arguments come in. The court does not take intervening lightly because it delays proceedings. And so it will be in the court's discretion as to allow it. But there are certain requirements, there are certain criteria under the rules that you have to meet. And if you don't meet it, and the court is I think Tom Abudi, we had this discussion. I think I probably mispronounced your words, in the last name, but about strict interpretation, right? And this is where it comes into play.
Okay. And you will make sure that those other ordinances are back on?
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll make sure
And
that-
Terry, believe me, we weren't picking on you.
The fact of the matter is
Do what
that
you're
if I was told to have those two ordinances on at the last meeting, I would have been, but I was told that the motion was to withdraw those two ordinances. So what does that mean?
I have one other item, Mayor. Just for everyone's clarity, and Mr. Cornell caught it, ordinance number 363-17, we had all remarked about the stricter bulk standards. It doesn't apply to that ordinance. It applies to 366B-17, which is the second one we discussed.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that, and the request
Yep.
to Mr. Leon Cavello is for 366B-17. The concept was right, the numbers were off.
The B.
Are there any other questions? Otherwise, we'll go to consent agendas. At this time, I'll open the public portion for questions or comments on consent agenda items. Barb, just half a second. Yes, sir, come on.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, Samuel Real Jr., Helmer, Connolly, and Castleman. On behalf of Snookers, you have that as Resolution 217-259 this evening. I just wanted to comment that it has been a pleasure to work with Marguerite Schaefer, who is your licensing counsel, Chief Zabrowski, and Lieutenant Brennan, as we work through some of the remaining issues. Snookers looks forward to being an asset to the community and looks forward to working with the municipality as it moves forward. And with that, I'd say thank you, Mayor and Council. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Barbara?
Barbara Kilcummins, 22 Schmidt Street. I know I've been absent from a few meetings, but I'm surprised to see 2017-260, a license to Golden Age Development. You know, I'm always looking for senior housing. Could you please elaborate and tell me where that's at?
Dan?
Is it new?
No, it's gone down.
260.
No. On your new agenda, it has
The trailer.
The new one has been changed.
the one you put on our desk here, Terry.
Jay, do you know where this is?
It's Gondak Drive.
Gondak Drive.
Gondak Drive.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Between Harbor Club and Spinnaker Point, 13-acre parcel, 96 units.
96 private homes or apartments, condos?
I believe that they are rental units.
Oh, so they're rental
I
units.
believe so.
You know, I'm still looking for housing, since we only have Spinnaker Point. Always looking for houses for seniors to purchase.
Right.
And like I pointed out many times, they had to go elsewhere after Sandy. They wanted to own a home. They had to leave town, especially all the seniors.
But these are age restricted. There's an age restriction that goes along with these
Yeah,
units.
but it's apartments. We have Gillette, which are apartments, 2 Gillettes. Residents that I speak to a lot in this community are looking for single-family homes, like we have in Monroe, other communities. And all with this going on with affordable housing and COA and everything else, I haven't seen that much housing for affordable for seniors. And you usually go where there's a request or a need for it. In this community, you do have a need for it. The other one, 2017-262. Could you please elaborate on long-term tax exemption?
Wayne?
This is an extension? I mean, do they already have a tax exemption?
This is the pilot agreement. It's another term they use for the pilot agreement. It's a pilot agreement for the Middlesex energy plant.
And where is that located?
On Journey Mill Road, in front of the former landfill 3 site.
Oh, this was the one, but I thought they were granted 30 years when they first applied.
No, it was revised,
It was revised
probably 2
because,
meetings ago is when it was brought up.
it was revised because there were changes made. It's actually going to be smaller.
Right.
So with that change in the size of it, there was restructuring
Yeah,
with the
for-
pilot agreement and the amount of monies that was,
For
go-
regulatory reasons, they were asked to size the plant down, so that changed all the other parameters.
The pilots.
Yeah.
I understand. 2017-263. I'm sure that's for the huge generator that's located right next to our Borough Hall.
Dan?
Yes, it is, Barbara.
Comments from the public. They wanted to know what it was, since, I mean, the Borough Hall is so attractive, and that generator is not in the location and everything else. I'm sure, I don't know why it couldn't have been located somewhere else, and then the size of it looks like it could be the generator for the whole community. So,
It was placed there
It's-
because you can't put it in the front of the building, you can't put it in the parking lot, you can't put it in the side that is the northern part where there's a problem. This was really the only physical place.
well,
that
is
you
there
could-
any way that they could put arborvitaes in front of it or so to try to conceal it?
I don't think you
if they
can
had-
seal that generator, Barbara.
Well, I'm sure even if it would be less unattractive if they put huge row of arborvitaes or whatever in front of it. And this is a comment from a lot of residents in the community. You know, I'm the
We'll
The
take a look
carrier.
at it, Barb.
2017-273. Where's this pole building going?
Go ahead.
Is that Fort
Paul Bar-
Grumpy?
That's Fort Grumpy.
2017-275. Again, I haven't been attending the meetings, but I've been keeping abreast of the agendas and whatnot. And I mean, since I'm sure the budget was adopted and it takes place for the fiscal year being July, we have spent close to $750,000 on equipment. I still don't understand why we can't rent equipment, especially of a lot of equipment it's not used. There's a lot of people that speak to me that are in business and know what's going on and keep an eye and keep track of what's going on down at Fort Grumpy and what is used and what is not used and how often it's used. And many times it was just like twice a year. So I see no reason why we can't start renting equipment instead of laying out $1 to $2 million every year on equipment. The next two that I have is 2017, 277, and 278. This is probably the Duhernal property that's located in Monroe. Are we selling it to Monroe? Or is that up for sale for anyone?
Jay? Or Dwayne?
Up for sale to anyone. It's not,
Well, right now you're getting
there's an
appraisals.
interest in someone purchasing it, contractor, I guess, to build homes. And it's not needed for the Duhernal site. It was something that came as part of the entire package of Duhernal. And since there is an interest in it, we thought it would be a good idea if we pay taxes on it. We have to pay taxes on it because it's outside our jurisdiction.
Well, I think it's a good idea if we sell it at a good
Right.
fair or a good
We get
price,
something for
especially
it.
if it's going to a developer.
Right. And they're gonna take all or nothing. They're gonna take some wetlands with it. That is no use to us either.
I mean, it's hard to follow block numbers and lot sizes and all about how big is this property, Jay? Is it
It's in the 30-plus acre
30
size, yes.
plus
A lot of
acres?
it is wetlands, but it's in excess of 30 acres.
Okay, the last one is 2017, 279. ESI, the extension of a supplemental financial agreement with ESI. Could somebody please elaborate and explain what that is?
Wayne?
This is the pilot agreement for our first power plant that was in Saraville, which was known as North Jersey Energy down on Journey Mill Road.
The first one.
Right, and it was acquired by Westinghouse, and then Nexteria acquired it from Westinghouse.
So
or
this is the
whoever.
third owner.
So this is another 6 years, and this will be the last 6 years with it, because it'll come to full term now. But it's for the same amount of money, annual payment, $640,000, as was in the past, which we thought was, which was pretty good, because the plant is almost deemed obsolete. They only use it at peak times. Does not run the entire year. So.
Well, like I mentioned, Cedarville Economic Redevelopment was formed to help bring ratables into the community. And apparently the only ratables that we have ever acquired have been energy companies. And I believe there's like 5, 6 of them. And what did we do but give them abatements? We gave them huge tax abatements. So you're not really helping the taxpayers of this community. And now it seems it switched with the economic redevelopment with Sarah to housing. And what do they do with the first housing that they put up? They created a pilot. And the pilot not paying tax, school tax. So this really hurts the taxpayer in the community, and it defeats the purpose of the economic redevelopment. So they're not really helping the taxpayers here. My recommendation is disband the Economic Redevelopment Company, because it really hasn't been helping. And now, with COA and everything else, they seem to be more involved with housing. And it's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Jim?
Thank you very much, Mayor. Jim Robinson, 11 Burrell Square. And I'm going to pick up on something that my friend Mrs. Kilcummins raised on 2017-260, Golden Age Development on Gondak Drive. You know where that is, right, Mayor?
I do.
Okay. I have the resolution of approval that indicates that and I'll read it. Last time I was prohibited from reading, but I'm going to read letter C here in the resolution of approval. It says the redeveloper shall be obligated to comply with all such affordable housing requirements as shall be determined to be applicable and imposed by the Sayreville Planning Board as a condition of any development approvals which said board may choose to grant. Is there an affordable housing component in this project?
Mr. Robinson, I'll speak on that for now, because I'm glad you brought that up. I did not know about the Gondak Drive redevelopment site until my last Sarah meeting, where a gentleman, one of the attorneys for that site, came in. The first question I asked when I heard that there was going to be 96 units built there, and I asked how many of them are going to be affordable. 0 are affordable, 0. So I started to 0. I was floored. I actually brought it up here at the last council meeting. I turned around after that meeting, completely baffled and annoyed. And I started to do digging of my own, and I was able to get my hands on multiple documents dating back to, like, I think it was 1997, 1998, when apparently discussions were being made to develop that area. What I found was most interesting is probably the document that you have before you. I think it's probably 2007, perhaps?
2009, I think.
2009, I had a lot. And yeah, that's page 4 of that redevelopment agreement, and yes, I'm good. And it specifically says that there is to be affordable housing in there. Specifically says, so as far as I'm concerned, that's in violation of the redevelopment agency's agreement with that developer. Interestingly enough, though, the copy I got, maybe you had better luck, mine was missing pages 2 and page 3. So if you have those, I'm really interested to see what they have to say. My copy did not have those 2 pages. I had already circled that 2017-260. There is absolutely no way that I would vote in favor to turn around and put sales trailers on a block that isn't even meeting its obligation with the redevelopment agreement that it was signed back in 2009.
This is Mr. K's property, right?
As far as I know, yes, it is.
This is the property that I asked Mr. Sachs to research when you had the meeting in 310. There was a special meeting on affordable housing. Do you recall that? And this is the property that the planning board, very long time ago, included in the master plan because there was a density bonus given to Mr. Kay when some other projects were developed on Ernston Road. And before Mr. Newton and I left the planning board, we wanted to make sure that it was memorialized in there that he owed the town affordable housing in exchange for the density bonus. And during the public portion, I asked that that be looked into, and the council directed Mr. Sachs to look at that. I don't know if he ever did. I didn't ever hear the response, but this has to be looked into, and especially since we're in the situation we are with right now with the affordable housing, that if 96, is that what you said, Councilwoman?
I'd have to go back and look. I had multiple ones.
Well-
96 seems the most.
90-something. If he's going to do 90-something and not have an affordable housing component where in other areas of town we are violating good common sense and planning and putting the most dense development that there is anywhere in town, and at the other end of Ernston Road, they're not required to put in any affordable housing. And this is not his only project. I mean, that requirement was put in the planning board years ago because a lot of acres that he owned was previously developed. And Mayor, you and I spoke to you about this years ago when Judy Verone was the attorney. And I think I probably also spoke to members of the council about that. So that should certainly be looked into. And I was kind of surprised. I think this was on the agenda for the last meeting, and that's why I requested the resolution of approval, because I was kind of surprised.
Interestingly enough, I mean, now, Mr. Cornell did state that they are age restricted. That is only a 55 and over age restriction, as you know. When I requested information about the number of bedrooms to those 96 units, I was not given any information because the attorney could not quote how many, whether it be 1, 2, or more. He said he believed it was multiple, I believe was the term that was used. You have to check the tape on Sarah. But, you know, this is all information that needed to be researched, looked at before our fair share housing plan was put together, before we turned around and had anybody sitting down with Kaplan to agree to settlements on developments that aren't even zoned for residential use. All good things that needed to come to light a long time ago.
Ms. Kilpatrick, excuse me, Jim, do you mind? I just wanted to ask Ms. Kilpatrick. Ms. Kilpatrick, in your research for Sarah, did you not also find out that there are fees that they are behind in?
I brought it to the attention of our chairman immediately when I found it of Saraville Economic Redevelopment Agency, because I believe that according to that agreement, there may be some issues regarding fees and definitely potentially issues regarding time limits of development, which would potentially, and I don't know, I don't want to, you know, say something, I don't know if that renders the agreement invalid. In many of the things that I read, it's a possibility. So I'd ask that the chairman reach out to our attorney to further research that, especially now that we have these other ordinances before us.
Okay, and as long as you mentioned fees, one of the things that I wanted to ask about, and I think two of the council members brought up already, was ordinance number 36417, which is the fee ordinance.
Jim, it's a consent
Yeah,
agenda.
we're on the consent
Yes.
agenda right now.
And I'm talking about the trailer ordinance and maybe why it shouldn't be approved, or maybe why some due diligence. I can connect anything, Mayor.
In your mind, that's true.
Was that an insult? I
No,
didn't
it's
come
a
here to be
fact.
insulted,
It's a
Mayor.
fact.
I'm trying to do some things
Jim,
to make Saraville better,
proceed.
not bigger, because somebody has to do that.
Jim, it's not
Okay,
you,
so my
but proceed.
question is this: will this development that is getting the trailer, that is the subject of 2017-260, I guess they won't be subject to that fee ordinance?
That is exactly why I question why the developmental fee ordinance is not before us right now, considering it appears to be a rush to now put sales trailers on property when I'm looking into currently the redevelopment agreement, and I believe it's been brought to at least one attorney's desk. I don't know how things happen behind the curtain, but I don't like it, you know, when something doesn't smell right.
Okay. One other question, if I may, Mayor, with respect to another item that my friend Mrs. Kilcummins brought up, 2017-279, weighing the cogeneration agreement. What's the dollar amount? What is the borough getting? 640,000? And I was on the planning board, Mr. Newton was on the planning board, Mayor McCormick was the mayor back then when we brought in this energy company. And was this a deal where it was a sliding scale and for 5 years it was a certain amount and then a 20, 20, 20, or?
This one was not.
This one was not?
No.
You got the total amount every year?
That's correct. Originally, it was, I believe, 800,000.
Okay.
And then about 10 or 12 years ago, the first renewal, it was reduced down to 640 when they were no longer a 12-month operation.
Okay. So 10 or a few years ago, this governing body reduced it to 6-something, but it was 8-something. What would they have paid in property taxes? Or, because you're not the assessor, let me ask it this way. Is that more or less than they would have paid in property taxes?
I could not tell you right now, but and when I talked to the assessor, he said he'd have to go in and research it to see, because like I had mentioned previously, the plant is not at the same standard as it was.
I understand. I'm talking about originally when they came in. My recollection is when they originally came in, the amount that they would be paying us is more than they would be paying in property tax. That's correct, right? So the borough, while Mrs. Kilcummins' comment might be correct as to what has happened lately, when this was done during the McCormick administration and when Mr. Newton and I were on the planning board and actively worked to bring this operation in, the borough actually got more money from the pilot agreement than it would if they paid property taxes, right?
In any of these long-term tax exemption agreements and pilots, there is a component, the land tax remains the same. When I say the land tax remains the same, it's assessed like any other property would be, and it's taxed like any other property, where there's the county component, the school component, and the local component. And that has risen every year because the tax rates for varies to school and what have you.
Well, I just wanted to set the record straight on that, that these don't have to be a drain on the town, and if they were structured correctly as they were during the McCormick administration, they aren't a drain on the town.
And they're not a drain on the school.
Certainly not.
And
is their water bill up to date?
And it does go, yes, and it does get applied to the local tax effort, okay, because it's part of a general revenue in our local budget.
Okay, very good, thank you. I just wanted to set the record straight because a number of us had worked very hard to bring them in, and it helped to reduce the property taxes in Sayreville.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other questions? I didn't hear you.
It was clear to you? You understood?
Jim, sit down. You are the most consistent person I ever met. Are there any, yes, sir.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Charlie Lukey from down on Oak Street in Melrose. I've been here before. My latest complaint, I got somebody throwing nails.
Say that again, Charlie.
I got somebody throwing nails.
Nails?
Nails. My neighbor got 3 flats in the last month and a half.
Somebody doing a roof or a remodel there?
No. This is the find today. Rusty. Okay? The other day, I took his...
Charlie, this is the consent agenda, but out of deference
Well,
and respect
can you get somebody to inform the people?
Pass it up. We're going to have somebody down there tomorrow.
Yes, can you get somebody to spread the word down there that this is crazy?
Yep.
I mean, it's costing us money, I mean, you know, but it's ridiculous. You know, what are we going to do?
What's your address, Charlie?
324, the lower section of Oak Street.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
I'd appreciate it. You'd call the police department, send them down there, tell the neighbors
Okay,
Find out who's doing this and stop it.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on the consent agenda items? Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, before I close the public portion, I'm asking that we table 2017-260, just for clarification. That's the temporary portable trailer.
Say that again?
I'm making a motion that we table 2017-260, and for clarification, because I know it had different numbers throughout the week, it's the temporary portable trailer.
Second.
What number is that?
First page.
Okay, and what's the second number he wants?
No, that's it, just the one.
Okay. You know, for the record, before the vote is taken, one of the things I'd like to point out to everybody, of all the builders that have ever come to Saraville, the focus seems to be on the two Jewish builders. And I have a real issue with
Oh, my
overt
God.
anti-Semitism here. It is my
That is
comment,
the
it
most
is my
outlandish
belief.
remark I've ever
Oh,
heard in
my
life.
God,
That's-
Kennedy.
You've
That is my
actually made
remark.
You should wash
I'll
your
say
mouth
highlight
out
bill.
with soap. I didn't even know these people
That's
were
a highlight
Well,
Jewish.
you
there,
know
man.
now.
Oh, my God.
So, that being said,
What
I'll
an awful
entertain a
thing.
motion for a roll call vote.
Mary, Mary
I
second.
seconded it, Karen. I seconded it. Wow.
Councilpersons Buchanan,
I am voting yes.
Grillo,
Under the assumption that we get the information that Councilwoman Kilpatrick requested,
Yes.
then I will vote yes, and I hope to have those questions answered. I don't want this tabled forever.
Kilpatrick,
Yes, same.
Lembo,
Yes.
Melendez,
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
I need a motion to close the public portion and adopt the
Motion to
consent
close the
agenda.
public portion and adopt on roll call vote.
Minus 260.
Mayor, I move that the public portion be closed and the consent agenda resolutions be approved with the omission of 260.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Buchanan,
Yes.
Grillo,
Yes to everything but 2017-276.
276. Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Lembo,
Yes.
Melendez,
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Mayor, before we proceed any further, could we just get a, as we all know, the public might not know, we were supposed to have a hearing at 6 o'clock. We can just get a, update on that from Mr. Dupont?
Yes, I had been in contact with counsel, Mr. DeSarno, who had indicated that he's represented Mr. Ty. Following the communication with Mr. DeSarno, as well as receiving a letter from Mr. DeSarno, I prepared a letter to the Borough Administrator asking that this matter be carried so that I can provide the documentation, list of witnesses, so that we could hold a hearing with, a proper efficiency, and also to prepare Mr. DeSarno and his client for any type of hearing that we may have in the future. So I had sent a letter requesting that the matter be carried from tonight's agenda.
Thank you.
Mr. Dupont, if I may, I respect that as an attorney, you want to make sure that the proceedings regarding Mr. Ty, who's the chairman of the planning board, be conducted in the most appropriate and the most effective and legal way. However, and I do believe that Mr. Ty deserves that opportunity to speak if he so chooses. However, I will not, as a council person here, sit idly by when there are other means in order to address this situation. And I am going to, at this moment, I'd like to call upon the mayor to do what is in his capabilities based on this council and our ordinances, to actually stand up and remove Thomas Ty as chairperson for the planning board, because Mayor, you are the one up here that has the ability to do it. We do not unless we go through that hearing. And I would like to read under what reasons I believe, Mayor, that you should consider this and that you should do this. First, Under New Jersey State Statute 10:4-10, I'm sorry, 10:4-10, it is required that statements and minutes of adequate notice must be provided and must be stated at every meeting. As a matter of fact, that statute states at the commencement of every meeting of a public body, the person presiding over the announced publicly and shall cause to be entered in the minutes of the meeting an accurate statement to the effect adequate notice of the meeting had been provided, specifically the time and place in which the notice was provided. Each meeting, the mayor gives direction to the clerk to do such, and I believe that our planning board, under the chairperson, Mr. Ty, that was not done. In addition, I also believe that planning board chairperson, Mr. Thomas Ty, violated yet another state statute, 10:4-13, in reference to entering into executive closed session meetings. It is under that statute that he is required to state exactly what is going to be discussed when a board or when a party enters into closed session meetings. It is my understanding, having watched multiple meetings, that that was not entered into appropriately. In addition to that, I believe that under NJSA statute 10:4-15, any action taken by a public body at a meeting which does not conform with the provisions of this act shall be voidable. Considering that we all know the COA situation here before us has been handled by the planning board, these executive sessions could have dramatic impact on whether or not any of which we vote on today and moving forward are actually valid. This puts our borough and puts all of us in great jeopardy, in my opinion. Mayor, it's under those acts that I feel, and I ask of you, to use your authority to remove Mr. Ty from his position. On a side note, outside of those statutes, I also have personal objection to some of the other things that Mr. Ty and the way he conducted himself in reference to addressing our residents. I have listed here in front of me different dates in which I feel that he has overstepped and he has completely disregarded the respect that our townspeople should have. On March 1st, Miss Ruth Ann Mahoney was speaking on the Kaplan property portion of our COA agreement, expressing her concerns, and Mr. Ty invalidated her comments by stating, quote, "You don't care what happens near the Morgan Firehouse because you don't know where it is." I find that offensive, and any resident that comes to speak should be treated with the utmost respect. On June 21st, Mr. Ty was commenting on a resident who had spoken out against the COA plan, and Mr. Ty made disparaging remarks about a resident who came to discuss her concerns. Again, on June 21st, Mr. Ty had made a comment, quote, "I hurt them where it counts. I don't give them any money for their council seats." I don't even know in what capacity he's referencing. But I believe that, Mayor, those are just a few of the reasons why Mr. Ty is not fit to hold that position, in my personal opinion. And lastly, on June 21st, Mr. Ty was asked by members of the planning board if he was going to the next council meeting to defend the planning board's actions in reference to the COA situation. Mr. Ty stated, and I quote, "I don't want to go there and smack somebody." I understand that hearings and such, in order for a council to vote whether or not to remove Mr. Ty, would be necessary. But based on all of these situations and many others I can probably pull, I believe, Mr. Mayor, that you have the right and you have the ability to remove somebody that is not acting in the manner in which we would hold either an appointed or elected position. So at this moment, I would like to move this forward as a resolution and ask that we, as a council, vote to have the mayor use his power to remove Mr. Ty at this time.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
What exactly does the resolution say?
That for all the reasons stated in the last couple of minutes, that I call upon you, Mayor.
That's a pretty long resolution.
That's okay. I think we can get it taken care of. I don't mind flipping a page or two.
Go ahead.
I did withhold from that also the disparaging comments that were made against our president, Council President Danny Buchanan.
What was that comment?
I believe that he had made the comment that Mr. Buchanan did not know how to even hold a map, and referred to him as Fatso.
Is that what this is all about?
No, if it was all about that, I would have included it.
That's what you take out of this, Mayor? Really? That's what you take out of it?
No, that's what I think.
Mayor, I was
That's what I
hoping-
think this is about.
Mayor, you're absolutely absurd tonight, in my opinion. You're
damn.
absurd.
Well.
Mayor, if that was the issue that I was most concerned about, I would have read that first. However, I didn't even include it within the ordinance.
Is that included in the ordinance?
Or, I'm sorry, in the resolution.
that
My
included?
bigger concern is for our residents. You heard the statutes that I believe were in violation based on the videos that we all have the ability to watch and see. At one point, on the, let's see here,
You didn't even mention all of it.
April 19th meeting, the attorney for the planning board actually said to him, let's see, it says, the attorney stated, they entered into a closed session meeting, and this is the attorneys. As soon as I find out what the business is, I will make a resolution. They go into they go to enter into executive session, and he actually warns Mr. Ty and says you should have a memorializing resolution each time you go into executive session. And he continued to enter into those executive sessions still against the advice of the attorney and against what is by state statute law for presiding over these meetings. I have no idea what was discussed in those closed session meetings. You as residents have no idea what was discussed in closed session meetings. Some of that could have been and probably was in relation to the COA situation that we right now have before us that's going to impact every single one of our lives. Mayor, I'm calling upon you, now that you have all of this before you, to do what only you can do, which is remove this gentleman for not acting in the manner that he was appointed to represent us, to represent you, to make sure that our town is taken care of. There are multiple statutes that I just read to you that were in violation. I have the dates, I have the minutes. If you can watch the videos, Mayor. I'm calling upon you. This has been seconded by Ms. Novak. You have the right to do what you wish, Mayor. That's your choice. Do we move forward?
Motion made and seconded. You have to do a roll call.
Councilpersons Buchanan,
Yes.
Grillo,
Quick comment, we've already voted to have a hearing with Mr. Ty and with legal representation, so I'm not willing to try him in absentia this evening. I think that he deserves an opportunity to defend himself. I agree with my colleagues 100% that his comments towards Councilman Buchanan were absolutely inappropriate. However, Councilwoman Kilpatrick brought up technical issues that she claims he was in violation of. I think he should have the opportunity to defend those technical decisions and explain those. So I'm going to vote no against the resolution because I don't believe the mayor should be taking action tonight. I think that we should stick with our original position, which was to have a hearing in front of the governing body and give him an opportunity. So my vote is no.
Kilpatrick,
I vote yes.
Lembo,
I'll be voting to let the legal process play out and let him have his day, so I'll vote no.
For the record, this is not for him to not have a hearing. I'm just simply calling upon the mayor to do what he has the ability to do if he so chooses.
Good day.
Melendez,
Yes.
Novak,
Yes, I'd just like to say, first of all, I don't think it can continue much longer. I have watched meetings since then, and his comments, particularly to the public, are highly inappropriate. It sounds like it's bullying, quite like happens here often. We could have a hearing and vote to remove him, and then the mayor, by law, could immediately replace him. So if the mayor does this, then maybe we have a chance of him not being immediately put back on again.
Put it on my desk.
Mayor.
Whatever
they-
it is they voted on. Okay. All right, next order of business is public portion. There's a 5-minute limit, so any questions or comments, Tom?
Thomas Bashada, 17 Green Hill Avenue, Parlin, New Jersey. Couple things here. Let's start off with, I'm on video and audio. At a planning board meeting dated August 16th, where the planning board approved only Kaplan Site, Camelot 1 and Camelot 2. Mr. Ty and the attorney both said that those were the only two that they were sending forward to the council. The last council meeting, we wind up here with 366 17B, which I understand that Mr. Sachs rewrote. Now, how can he rewrite something that's approved by the planning board that was memorialized by them to send to the council?
I didn't have any 317B.
I'm sorry?
Tom, I did not have any 317B, and that was not on the last agenda. 366-17B.
Right, but we went through that. He had presented that to the council, am I correct? And you pulled it. But anyhow, look, let's not make a... The problem that I have is that when someone proves something and someone else changes it, how can this be? It should have been, if it was going to be 366-17B, it should have been republished in the paper, and the people that were affected should have known about it. And he snuck in, and I'll say that, snuck in the Melrose section that was not originally set by the planning board. Mr. Grillo, he took it out, and the other council members took the Melrose thing out, which was the case section of that thing. I'm satisfied. Thank you. Just some side notes here with this COA stuff. I gave Mrs. Kilpatrick at the beginning of the meeting, and I spoke to Mrs. Novak and Mrs. Kilpatrick earlier last night at the memorial service. There's a Jeffrey R. Surnanen. He's in Brielle. He's an attorney, and he has 40 to 60 different municipalities that are fighting the COA thing he's representing. And he also has a Dr. Robert Burchell, who's a professor at Rutgers, who's his expert on municipal matters, okay? I would advise the council to look into this attorney and come up with an idea, because I think we're being railroaded by this. And if we can get a group which we can become a part of the 40 to 60 municipalities fighting this, I think we've got a darn good chance of reversing what's been shoved down our throats. As an example, last Tuesday I was in Homedale, and I mentioned to some people what was going on in Cedarville. This one woman mentioned to me that the town got together, and the people contributed, hired an attorney, and fought COA and won. So that's something to think about. Now, the fair share plan that Mr. Peter O'Connor originally originated out of Camden, the original process that he had voted for was 20%, not 15%. Now, whoever negotiated this, if it's 20 and we're stuck with, we should get 20 instead of 15. That's what's going on. It's believe me, it's public record about Mr. O'Connor. The last thing that I have here is that at the last meeting, Mr. Grillo, you brought up about getting a hold of the tax assessor and finding out about open space, the Melrose section.
Correct.
Have we had any results from that?
We have an open space meeting this week. I believe it's Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay, and we should have an answer for the next council meeting if we can?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And the last question I have is, what happened to the meeting that we were talking about here at the council between the council, the planning board, the housing, the zoning board, and Sarah? We were all supposed to get together and have something at the high school cafeteria where everybody can sit down and the public would be invited. Whatever happened to that meeting?
I'll answer that one, Mr. Bashada. I got emails stating that the planning board was not coming and that the zoning board were not coming. The chairman and attorney for Sarah were out of town, and the Housing Authority chairman was out of town. So at tonight's meeting, I was going to try to reschedule it. The planning board says that they don't have to come, even though there's on ordinance it's 40:55D-25. The planning board may, and he goes down to a few things in 3 is perform such other advisory duties as are assigned to it by ordinance or resolution of the governing body. So, we're trying to use them as advisory as well, and they said they're not coming. So hopefully we're going to reach out to them again and see what we can do.
Tom, the letters that I got from the planning board attorney and the zoning board attorney it was against the law for them.
I believe that was
Well,
only for
Daniel-
the zoning board.
Well,
See,
we should make those letters public and
You
we'll
know,
go from there.
one of the things I had a member of the zoning board say to me that the attorney Sachs told him not to show up at it. But here's the problem, and I told him, what you do is you can publish in the back of the paper in the legal notice that you are attending a meeting with no action taken. That covers you. Am I correct, Mr. DuPont?
Yeah, as long as there's no action being taken and no specific
So they can all
project
show up.
is being discussed. The dilemma that you face is if, in fact, that.
Yeah, but if you can have a discussion with no action taken and everybody is there. And I'll tell you the truth, as a council, you have control over these other groups.
Not the planning board.
Not the
Well,
planning board.
then Mayor Kennedy O'Brien, could you please instruct the planning board to show up for a meeting such? Because it affects 45,000 people in this town. It's just not the people in Melrose, and it's not just the people on Ernston Road but it affects everyone. And I just wish that we could get together and let the people know, like I mentioned how many times, transparency. Let us know what's going on in this town. And that's the issue that's going on. We don't know. We don't know what the planning board decided. Okay?
Tom, we got an ordinance, as you were at that meeting, we got an ordinance, which one was it? The 366B. And I watched that video that you were at, and you got up and spoke in that meeting, and the attorney walked over to the chairman on video and said, I don't know if the members saw this, do not mention B, do not mention B. Here we have B. I'm assuming it's B this time because we had the changes that we requested in it were made on it. But again, they were told not to mention B at the meeting on video.
Yeah.
So here's more of the problems that the leaky faucet still continues to leak, and they were told we're not coming to a meeting because it's illegal. But I just read an ordinance, a state statute that says that they can come for advisory, which is advisory. Again,
we're
it's
all
gonna fall on
shooting for the
deaf ears, Tom.
transparency, Tom, and Mr. Bashada. That's one of the reasons why I commended Councilperson President Buchanan for bringing those together. We've all been screaming for that, and then we turn around and what a slap in the face to try and bring these people together, and then to have one of the boards that was the only one that could really explain their thought processes behind why these things say what they do, and then say they're not going to show up. I mean. Now, in reference to Sarah, yes, Mr. Diadio, I think, was one that, but we had agreed to create a subcommittee with individuals that were able to come in his place. It's a slap in the face to every one of us,
Like I said, I wish someone, Mayor, I would ask someone with your authority to contact this Jeffrey Cernan and contact him and see what the municipality can do and to get into the action with COA.
I have the
Mrs.
here.
I gave it to Mrs. Kilpatrick because, again, I had discussed this last night at the end of the conclusion of the ceremony, and I think it's a very important fact that if we can somehow, look, I'm not against affordable housing. What I'm against for, and I guess a lot of these people in town, is more development in this town. That's the issue. Mr. Grillo, if you remember, I talked about Staten Island, am I right? In Galee's Tavern there a couple of meetings ago. And what it looks like right now with no parking, double parking out in the streets, and condominiums on top of condominiums. We don't want that in Searle.
Just to be fair, because this has come up. There are 470,000 people in Staten Island.
Yeah, but
it's a bit of apples and oranges, let's be honest.
Okay, but apples and oranges, but we don't want the apples and oranges here in Searle. I'm speaking for myself, but I know a lot of other people feel the same way. You know what it's like to travel in this town. You know what the school system's going to be like. There's a lot of issues. The municipal services that are going to be generated have to be generated. The water supply, when you're talking about selling property at Duhernal, which...
Hey, Tom, just to put things in perspective, so if you go back in the history of Saraville, when they built Winding Woods, which was a controversy unto itself, the largest apartment complex in Saraville, it was sold on the basis it would be for the children of Saraville residents who couldn't afford a home. Today, 10% of our school children come from Winding Woods. Now, the average apartment in Winding Woods pays or is assessed a couple of $1,000s in property tax. I'm not including the common areas. But Tom, what do you spend per child on average?
The town spends about a little over $9,000, and then with the financial aid from both federal and state, it's a little over $12,000 to educate one
So we
student.
spend $12,000 a student, which we, listen, it's
low.
the obligation of society to educate its children. So obviously, there's an imbalance there. They use more in services than they contribute in taxes, but pretty much anybody with a kid is going to fall in that same category. But then as the real estate market changed and you could no longer profitably buy property and build a single-family home and go 4 per acre, 3 per acre, and you had to go to the townhouses and the condominiums and go 4 or 5 or more per acre, the density increased. So over the last 30 years, where we've had these huge jumps in population, when you were a child, it was a fairly rural community. It was industrial. They had, you know, we had the Crossman Sand Company. When you were a kid, the brick factory was probably still.
I lived on Hillside Avenue. I watched them dig from one end to the other.
The whole thing is about change, but what I'm saying, the density, you know, we used to be 20% lot coverage, right? Post-war, the homes that were built in the 70s, whether it was my neighborhood, Woodside, or Green Valley, it was a 20% lot coverage. You can't, unless you're going to charge a tremendous amount of money, you can't do that. We have a lot of very old housing stock in Saraville, where a home is 1,100 square foot, 1,200 square foot. And what's happening are people are buying them, and then they're going to the zoning board, and they're getting approval, and they're going vertical because they're having families. They're having 2 kids, 3 kids, and they need to go from 1,100 square feet to 2,200 square feet, and they go straight up. You go through Laurel Park, you see, you know, that seems to be the standard that's happening here. You know, you have to adjust to the times. So this whole thing about better, not bigger, I've been working pretty hard for better, not bigger. But at the end of the day, the United States is founded on the rights of property owner. So when Saraville was running a budget surplus back in the 70s and 80s of well over $1 million a year, they were not buying property for perpetuity. So only now, we have tried to buy property in the last 17, 18 years. And usually we've been outbid. So it's not like we haven't been trying. We did preserve the well fields, 500 acres. DuPont did donate 100 acres to the borough of Saraville. You gotta remember, DuPont donated the property that the First Aid is on. DuPont donated the property that the Y was on, and when the Y was put on the ballot for the people of Saraville to purchase, they didn't want to purchase it. We preserved the last farm in the 19th district, Deeker's Farm. So we've been active preserving property, but you can't get it all. And then the property that remains, it is the right of a property owner. Whether you buy that house in Laurel Park, that's 1,200 square feet, and you have a growing family, and you need more bedrooms, so you're going to double its size by going vertical, or somebody that's going to come in and put more housing units per acre. It's a sign of the times.
See, I think Mr. Olszewski, Ken Olszewski said it. My feeling is I'd like Saraville to remain Saraville, not a city, a borough.
Unless you own the property, and we own well over a third of all property in Saraville.
You know, and the issue, Mr. Mayor, is that I still have, and I brought it up earlier, and I brought it up at the planning board, about a judge deciding what we have to do in our town.
Yeah, but
you
wait
know?
a minute, we elect the people that appoint the judges. So we're essentially getting the government that we voted in. So all of a sudden, the state Supreme Court says, we don't like COA, we don't like that towns can sell their obligations to urban areas. We want it spread equitably and evenly throughout the state, so all 560 municipalities are gonna participate in low income. Now, low income includes a teacher in the first couple of years of their contract. It's not necessarily those that are the poorest of the poor. You know, you have people that are starting out in life, and just as it was with Mount Laurel. I had a friend who bought a Mount Laurel home 30 years ago. Lived there a couple of years, and then she sold it when her situation improved. She wasn't really allowed to recognize I don't know whether she got any profit out of it, but she was a homeowner for that period of time. It's a living document, housing. So I would like Sayreville to remain rural, but Hercules, which was a very paternal factory for 100 years here in Sayreville, was now purchased by Ashland. Ashland is not a paternal company. They have hundreds of acres over there that they want to develop. They don't want, you know how you grew up hunting back behind Hercules? It's not gonna happen.
No, I understand that. but-
They want to capture the assets that they own, and it was a nice history, it's a nice story to them, but they are not allowing it to remain pristine. They are actively looking to develop that property.
You know, that's one of the things that I would rather see in this town is industry. You know, everybody has always talked about, this was a town where people lived and worked in, and outsiders came to this town to work. That's what we're missing in this town. Rateables are not housing units. That's one of the issues that's been addressed here.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
You know, and this is.
We have limited options.
But, all right, look, instead, other people want to speak. I just wanted to tell Mr., I can't remember your name right now. Frankel, nothing's done on my street yet in my front steps. You told me to see you after Labor Day. Still nothing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Ken? And then you.
Thank you, Mayor. Ken Olszewski, 108 North Edward Street. Mayor, I'm going to give you a passing grade on knowing the history of the town. I think you did a pretty good job, even though Mr. Bashad and I have been here much longer than you. We were able to listen, and it sounded pretty good. But I want to tilt the conversation of what's going on right now. And by the way, Mr. Bashada a couple meetings ago said something like, it seems that we're more interested in helping developers than we are in helping the people of Sayreville. I think that comment was right on, and I agree with that comment. Over the weekend, I, like many other people, have been watching television and the storms, terrible hurricanes that we've encountered down in Florida and Texas. And I heard a comment from, I think he may have been one of the emergency management people. He quoted that old philosopher, Mike Tyson. And the comment was, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And I think that's a very appropriate comment for what's going on with COA. I think there is a plan and has been a plan. And I think the plan of that planning board, which you're a part of, Mayor, has been to take care of the developers and ignore the law and the rules of what should be going on in Sayreville. And Councilwoman Kilpatrick mentioned earlier the developers' fees. Where in the world is the ordinance on developers' fees? Do we need to get a bloodhound to search that out? Could anybody, Councilman Lembo, you're on the planning board.
Wait a minute,
Do you
before
know
we
where
go
it's
to
at? Mayor, do you know where it's at?
Wait, let's ask the borough attorney that we
Go ahead.
We pay for this stuff.
Said to take it off.
I'm sorry. I was typing some notes on this litigation. If you could repeat your
We
question.
can't hear you, Mike.
Just repeat your question there, because I was
Okay,
writing
my
notes on what you were
question is,
asking.
where is the ordinance on developers' fees to give us, from the planning board, to give us the right to charge developers fees when they are not providing affordable housing? Apparently, that ordinance has been in effect for some time. Mr. Robinson mentioned this months and months ago.
Right.
I believe in a conversation with Mr. Sachs, who I believe is the planning board attorney in East Brunswick. He told me that's been in effect a long time there. I think perhaps Councilwoman Kirkpatrick said that. What's the matter with Saraville?
That was the discussion that was the basis for the motion to table 217-260 as to why the ordinance regarding the fees and accessory apartments were not presented. They were presented at the last council meeting and were tabled at the request of Mr. Sachs. So what I have promised the mayor and council, that I will ask where these two ordinances are, and I promise that I will present them and get them to you on 9/25, which I think you're correct in your assessment that they are pretty automatic and they should be adopted. But they are not before this mayor and council this evening. And I have not seen any comments from the planning board as to their comments on the ordinance regarding accessory apartments or charging developers for the appropriate fee.
It seems to me, excuse me, for whatever reason, Mr. Sachs said at the last meeting that they should be withdrawn because they needed to go back to the planning board. And obviously, they didn't go back to the planning board, they just went into limbo.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that, I know Mr. Sachs has a family wedding, but I can assure you that I will take steps to make sure that both of those ordinances, which I think are in the benefit of the borough of Saraville and should be certainly adopted, will be presented on 9/25 at your next hearing.
I would just like to say that all 4 of those ordinances were referred back to the planning board by myself personally.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and we will follow up on that. We will ensure that, I know that the borough clerk is very, very efficient and diligent with respect to this. So we'll have an answer by on or before 9/25 from the mayor and council.
And when were they referred back to the planning board, Terry?
Again, I would have to check my notes on that, but it was probably back, I'm going to think in April.
Well, I mean...
Well, the first time that we spoke about it, so you want to comment to me in
No,
back to the room?
And thank you, Mr. Dupont, but I think the question goes way beyond where they've been the last couple of years. I mean, and when people come to this microphone, like Mr. Bouchard and myself, and say, it seems that we're more interested in taking care of developers, you know, that's the reason why. I don't think anybody's here to, one time you told me I wanted to be on TV, Mayor. I think we're here to get answers to questions of why we are being scammed by developers in town and maybe by some of our own boards. Golden Age. I brought Golden Age up. I don't think most people knew the name of it at the last meeting. I think it's 96 units, and there's no affordable housing. Some of these other, I know the repetition, but they're appropriate here. Kaplan, in this last, I lose track of the names, the rentals that he built, the last ones, the law said there had to be affordable housing in there. Mr. Cornell said Kaplan volunteered to put affordable housing in there, and there's no affordable housing in there. Well, that's quite a joke on the people of Saraville. And quite frankly, I mean, such a gift. Now we're going to let these developers come in where they should have built 4.5 units of an acre of market rate housing. Now the judge is going to overturn this, and it's going to be 15 units an acre. I think the developers are going to have enough money here to have a reincarnation of Gene Autry to walk in that back door and start singing a version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town. It's going to be Santa Claus every day for developers. And it goes on and on. We're not going to have a plan before the judge. This looks like it's stalled because the planning board won't meet with us. The planning board's been meeting on these type of issues for years. I'm sure Mr. Robinson, who was chairman for years, can come up here and tell you how long that's been going on. People here voting against getting a planner with another set of eyes who to this date at least got Melrose out of this plan. We had people voting against it. Councilman Lembo, Councilman Grillo voted against that. It goes on and on and on. My God. Yeah, I think Mike Tyson is right when he says everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. The sad part about this is that people getting punched in the face, Mayor, are the people of Saraville. Go ahead.
Thank you. I need you to start bringing it to its conclusion.
That's it, Mayor. My conclusion is that it looks like a terrible scam on the people of Saraville.
Ken, I don't remember your work when you served up here for 6 years about bringing in affordable housing, buying up property. It's not ringing a bell for me.
Well, okay, let me fill you in on some of it. I'm the guy that got us to purchase Duhernal. I'm the first guy that brought it up when I sat in the chair up here, Mayor, to take the borough's long-term water supply needs. Ken Olszewski did that when he was sitting here. I'm the guy that after I got elected, I told you this story not long ago, maybe it's one of those few meetings consecutively that you missed, Mayor, where I said, when I was campaigning and knocking on doors, we were in Harbor Club. And I said, my God, how many units do they have an acre here? And when I got elected in 1989, the first thing I did was go to then Planning Board Chairman Jim Robinson and say, what can we do about this? And we changed the zoning law from 16 units an acre to 4.5 units an acre, Mayor. And that's what's been in effect. That's a few of the things I've done. I'd like to know what you've done as a member of the Planning Board about these issues here. And you've been silent on that, Mayor. You've never answered it. So maybe you can get us an answer to that.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, I'm waiting
You
for
cleared
Mayor,
it up.
So maybe you'll have it next meeting.
You
Thank
cleared
you.
it up. Jim? Oh, no, wait a minute. This young lady was first.
I'm Janice Benedetto, 1 Thomas Avenue in the Melrose section. I'm a person within the 200 feet of the Cross Avenue National Lead property. And I need a little clarification and a little education. Earlier it was mentioned that National Lead has now filed as a late intervener in our COA litigation. So Mr. DuPont, I would like us to understand exactly what that does to our efforts to make the 22 acres open space and to be maintained permanently as a nature preserve for the Melrose neighborhood.
Well, the motion hasn't been granted. It is presently scheduled for, I believe, this Friday. So I can't tell you what will happen on Friday. I do know that they have filed a motion to intervene. It is up to the judge. I know that Mr. Sachs has filed opposition, and that is all that I know at this point in time with respect to that.
Okay, can you define an intervener for me then?
Yeah, an intervener is not a party to a lawsuit. So it's basically petitioning the court to say, Judge, I have a certain right, and in this case it's a property right that they're alleging, that I need to protect. And that there is a rule that requires an intervener to follow. And they're saying, hey, look, although I follow this rule, I have a property right, but there's also deadlines. And so they've missed that deadline. So they're saying that, hey, listen, this property right is more important than this deadline. And so that's their basic argument at this point in time.
Now, I know the town owns 1 acre of the 22 acres in question. And I'm not aware exactly of how much National Lead owns, but based on tax records that are public record, it also seems like Middlesex Water Company owns some of it. Exactly how is this site delineated as far as ownership goes?
You know, I think Mr. Leon Cavella, who's our planner, might be able to answer the ownership of National Lead. I do not have the pleadings in front of me.
Upper Melrose. Jay would be better.
The Cross Avenue, Oak Street, National Lead site, Because it's also confusing when you look up tax records and things of that sort as far as block numbers, lot numbers, ownership. It's really muddled, and we believe there's a Middlesex Water Company property in there also, and what have you. So maybe we're doing something wrong, but I need an education.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mayor, I don't have property ownership issue. I think the majority of the property considered in the plan was owned by National Lead, and I know that the borough has an adjacent 1 acre parcel, but I'm not aware of any Middlesex water ownership. I don't know if Mr. Leon has ownership info.
I think Middlesex Water has some property that is similar to what you have, that is within the 200-foot radius, but they don't own anything within the property that we're speaking about. They're,
All right,
they're
so
a,
that
they're a
property
neighbor,
is
they're within a
exclude-
radius.
All right,
No,
so it's close
didn't
by.
say excluded, they're in the same way as your property is, it's in the 200-foot radius.
All right, maybe I'm on Thomas Avenue, so the water tower was directly across the street from the little kiddie park there. Maybe that's the water company's property, and that's not part of the site?
That would be the borough.
Mayor, no.
No, not the kiddie park. Where the water tower was across from the kiddie park.
I think that was National Lead's water tower.
That's correct. The National
It
Lead used to have a
wasn't
water
Middlesex.
plant on that property. National Lead owns that property. That's the site that's part of the discussion this evening.
All right, so maybe Middlesex Water Company has, you're saying, adjacent property, similar to my 200.
That would be
my
correct. That's my
home.
understanding, that's correct.
All right, one other question as far as budgets and open space committee procedures. The town has a budget for open space, which we discussed before, and if I'm remembering correctly, it's between $5 and $6 million.
That's not the budget, that is the amount that is in the open space trust fund.
All right, all right. So that's where I may not refer to things exactly properly, and I need some education. So that's what money we have put aside.
Put aside so far.
All right. As homeowners, and when we pay our real estate taxes, there is open space, portion of the bill. So we're adding to that trust fund each.
Annually, yes.
Annually. Okay. Now, what's the process that we need to go through to actually spend some of that trust fund?
That's the purview of the governing body. Okay, they find the appropriate property for open space. If they want to use those funds, that would be applied for that purpose. To be applied to that purpose.
All right. Maybe Mrs. Novak, you can explain how things would go forward, because at the last meeting there was discussion of making a motion to purchase the property in question in Melrose and things of that sort, and we're looking at also many organizations that assist in purchasing open space for towns and things of that sort. So what would be the process? Because at the last meeting, it was determined one council member recommended a motion, and then we didn't make the motion did not take place, and what have you. And we want to proceed with spending some of that trust funds, or putting it on a ballot if we have to, or what's the proper procedures?
Well, what the Open Space Committee did a report, and in the report, it suggested what they felt should be purchased. During that time, it was put to the mayor and council. We did authorize Joe Cups, who is not only on the Open Space Committee, he's our tax assessor, to be the agent to go out and try to negotiate property. He has not done that because of this COA, because most of the property that had been recommended to be purchased by the Open Space Committee, it would be tied up with this COA agreement. So as of right now, he has not gone out there and done that.
All right, but that is something that, now that you're meeting on September 21st, can be a motion to have him begin that process for
Yes.
the property we're talking about.
I know that a while back, we had an assessment of what our 1 acre was worth.
Mhm.
We paid, probably the same person we paid here to do an assessment. I think it came out back at $176,000. Am I correct, Dan? Something like that?
Something like, yeah,
Yeah,
between
about
170 and 175.
176 for our 1 acre. So that would be a jumping point, you know, a starting point. But again, God forbid they allow National Lead to be an intervener. This whole thing is moot.
And our 1 acre is not part of the New Jersey Environmental Protection Agency investigation. It's not contaminated acreage.
I don't believe so, no. I will check on that, though, because I'm not 100% sure.
All right, because based upon that approximate price, you would think that contaminated acreage would be less. And you would think that then our trust fund would have enough money in it, and especially if we utilize funds that might be available from all of these organizations that the Melrose residents are learning about.
It just that there are other areas, a lot of other, maybe county funds, maybe state funds, maybe farmland funds, although that's not really farmlands, but other agencies, you know, a lot of times they will contribute a certain amount. But you have to keep in mind that right now, if National Lead thinks that they have a chance of selling this to a developer and making millions and millions and millions and millions and millions, they just won't sell to us. And we can't, right now, we can't go in there and condemn the property and take it. But this is something, the Open Space Committee has been recommending this for at least 6 years. For at least 6 years that I'm aware of.
I appreciate the Open Space Committee's efforts, and hopefully then at the hearing on Friday, we'll succeed in not having National Lead be successful as an intervener, and maybe that's the time to make an offer to them when they've been hopefully refused to go in and, you know, they might be a more favorable, it might be a more favorable situation for the town at that point, and they hopefully won't succeed on Friday. So I appreciate the education, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all of your efforts, as do all the residents of Melrose, and all of the deer and the owls and the wild turkeys and hawks and all the animals and the trees and wildlife that we're trying to preserve. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Charlie Lukey, Oak Street, Melrose section of Cerebral. Question about the property up on the top of the hill. To get there, you only have one road that goes in. Cross Avenue, actually, Costa Verde owns 10 feet of that, okay, across the roadway. Now, I got a question for Jay. Jay, how much is it gonna cost to do the road improvements that you're gonna need to get all them vehicles up on that hill? What are we talking? How many millions of dollars are we gonna spend and hang on the taxpayers of Cerebral?
Well,
Or is Mr. Kaplan gonna pay that bill?
any road development will be part of the construction cost for that developer, so it wouldn't be done by the municipality, it would be done as part of the development.
In other words, Oak Street, Andrzejewski Drive, Laurel Street, Farad Avenue will all be done by Mr. Kaplan?
Any road improvements that are associated with the development of that property, if eventually it's rezoned and eventually there's an application submitted to the board, there will be a traffic study, and that would dictate what improvements are necessary to develop that property. I can't say to you whether it would include Oak Street or any of the other side streets, but the construction of Cross Avenue to municipal standards would definitely be part of that application.
Cross Avenue is on the National Lead property. That's private property. That's not a borough street, okay? The borough street is Oak Street. To get to Oak Street, you gotta travel on Farad, Laurel, Andrzejewski, Kearney to get to Oak Street. That's way, okay? Those streets, the macadam there, is maybe 1.5 inches tops, What's the standard today? 6, 8 inches?
7.5.
7.5 inches. Well, how much is it gonna cost to repave them streets to the standard of 7.5 inches? You're talking millions of dollars. You're gonna allow this building to go on and hang the taxpayers for this millions of dollars? That's what's gonna happen. Just food for thought, fellas. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Jim?
Thank you very much, Mayor. Jim Robinson, 11 Burrell Square, former president of New Jersey Planning Officials, and former recipient of the Chabad of Hunterdon County Community Service Award. I think I invited you to the event. I can tell you this, that because of my knowledge as a former president of New Jersey Planning Officials, municipalities, governing bodies meet with their planning boards all over the state. It is not illegal. It is not inappropriate. In fact, it's good government, and when Mayor McCormick was the mayor, we did it a number of times. Zoning board wasn't involved, but the council and the planning board were. We didn't have Sarah back then. So I would suggest that you try and do that joint meeting. I do want to talk about the ordinance that was introduced, 366B-17, the standards ordinance. The last time I spoke about this, I think the council suggested to Mr. Leon Cavella that the standards for the most dense development in town, with the greatest number of stories, with the greatest number of people compacted in the smallest area, should at least match what is the borough standard in the rest of the town. And that change has not been made, and I'd like to ask Mr. Leon Cavella why that change wasn't made.
John, do you have an answer for that?
Mayor, Mr. Sachs informed me, or...
Do we have a mic, Terry, that we can give Mr. Leon Cavella?
So Mr. Sachs is making another decision?
We did not make those changes. I was informed by Mr. Sachs that the only change I should make per the judge was to delete the last item on the agenda that talked about...
Item K.
Item K.
Okay, and that was done?
And that was done. You have that before you.
Well,
Now-
didn't we discuss that at a future date, we could institute the bulk variance language?
Actually, I think, Mayor, you could make an amendment tonight when the ordinance is introduced. I mean, with all due respect to Mr. Sachs, he's not a planner. He's not a planner. He doesn't know what a planner knows about bulk standards and setbacks and lot
But
coverage.
Mr. Sachs is the director for this litigation, I understand. And if he tells me as a planner that I need this ordinance with 2 properties, Kaplan Site 1 and Kaplan Site 2, and I need this done this way, I understand that that's what he needs. I provided that for him.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, but the council
Directed
you to do something different.
Yes, I did. I did what you directed me. I
You
did a
didn't change the
report.
bulk standards.
I did change the bulk standards, but that ordinance was
To the
not.
strictest?
I have those changes here, and I gave you a report on it. That we make 80% of the bulk standards already. Those other ones might need bulk variances, and we may not be able to achieve the yield that you have already on the property in accordance with the plan. Therefore, we might need another property to use.
So what you're saying in 366, thank you, B-17,
It's 2 feet.
if you didn't squeeze this in, the builder wouldn't be able to get 300 units.
You may not be able to get 300 units.
And
That's what we
Okay,
wanted,
so-
right.
so there's no,
Then he will not get 300 units.
There
It's
is
gonna go
no-
to- it's going to go to the planning board
Well, there-
for final site plan
so
approval.
Mr. Leon Cavella,
Am I? Would you answer my question for one time?
No, that's not the way this works here.
Well, this is a
That's not the
discussion
way
that's
this works.
going on.
I'm a citizen who pays taxes.
I'm glad you pay
And
taxes.
you're a consultant from the borough.
And I'm telling you
okay?
what I know.
And I'm asking a question, Mayor. My question is this.
Well,
So,
Jim.
can I ask
what
my
is your
question before you object
What
to
is
it,
your
Mayor?
question?
The question is this. Even though the council said to change the standards, you didn't change them because Mr. Leon Cavella, the attorney, said you shouldn't change them.
Mr. Sachs,
Even
the
though, I'm sorry, Mr. Sachs, the attorney said you shouldn't change them, even though they are weaker than any of the other standards anywhere in town, and this development is more dense and more compact than any other development in the town, and there is no planning reason for you to have not changed the standards. There is no, you're not changing the standards is not based in land use. It's based on what Mr. Sachs told you to do.
Hold on, Jim. So
Ro-
I
Mr.
want the borough attorney.
Robin-
There's a legal strategy probably going on
Mr.
here,
Robinson, so,
which has to be respected.
Mr. Robinson, so,
Back to us.
I was the one at the last council meeting to, basically push off the introduction and/or adoption of these ordinances, because I thought it was substantial change. So at the last, I'm sorry, what? Couldn't hear me? I'm sorry. So at the last meeting, or at the last court appearance, I stood up and said it was me who, based on the discussions and based on the substantial changes to K and then through A through J, that we could not introduce because of the recommended changes that the mayor and council wanted. So the court looked at me and said, well, wait a minute here, you were supposed, I gave you deadlines. I said, that's correct, but I owe my duty and allegiance to the mayor and council, and it was based on my notice, or based on my 31 years of experience, that those were substantial changes, and you could not. And so that notice had to be redone, and the ordinances had to be rewritten. And so we set...
I understand that, but respectfully, my question is on the substance.
Right. And so the notices were, I don't know any discussion that Mr. Leon Cavello had with Mr. Sachs regarding the change. I did represent to the court that the mayor and council wanted the stronger bulk variances. That was the representation.
And so while you were there, the judge never said what Mr. Sachs told Mr. Leon Cavella.
No, the judge never said that. The judge wanted to know when the Kaplan ordinances were going to be, when the Kaplan ordinances were going to be introduced and adopted.
The judge
And
didn't-
I said that the introduction would be occurring this evening.
Okay.
And then the final adoption would be on the 25th.
And I'm going to guess the judge didn't say there should be a 20-foot setback instead of a 50-foot setback,
That's
right?
correct.
The
That's
judge
correct.
didn't get involved in any of that. That's purely the jurisdiction and the discretion of the town. I'll tell you something. Mr. Olszewski talked about when he became a councilman. He came to me and said, I walked through town and I saw some developments that were too condensed, too many homes, too close to one another. Mr. Olszewski, you ain't seen nothing yet if this ordinance is adopted this way.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, unfortunately,
Now,
Jim,
I would ask,
exactly what he's doing.
I'd ask the attorney, well, Mayor, respectfully, I jotted down how much time you gave other people.
I'm giving you time, Jim.
Okay, fine, and I would want
just
that
want-
same amount of
Jim,
time.
can I take a second of your time because I really have to clarify this. We gave Mr. Leon Cavella direction to to change these standards up to what is the highest standard in the town, to make this less dense. Mr. Sachs then told Mr. Leon Cavella, you can't do that because the judge said you have to leave it alone. The judge didn't say that.
No.
So the judge didn't say it. You took directions from Mr. Sachs, who obviously lied to you. And now we're sitting here with almost the same crap we had at the last meeting.
May I ask this, is it appropriate to amend this
And we want to keep passing
ordinance this evening? All it would take is changing a few numbers, 20 to 50.
Well, remember, that was the basis for my opinion that they were substantial in nature, right? my basis for the carrying the introduction was that, in my opinion, I thought that the changes were substantial in nature through A through J.
So the
and
tail is going to
removal-
wag the dog here.
Well, no, you
Good planning will be sacrificed
No, not-
because
no, not at all.
administratively, somebody
No.
made some mistakes.
Mayor, may I
It's like
interrupt
the
a
two
second?
ordinances that,
I think we might be going down the rabbit hole here a second.
Okay.
One moment, please. So, as I mentioned earlier, when we approved 5-1 ordinance 366B-17, we had all asked that Mr. Leon Cavello take the recommendations he provided in this correspondence, which is the bulk standards that you've requested and that Councilwoman Kilpatrick requested. So what we're doing is we're taking that ordinance, correcting it using this information, and voting on it at our next meeting. So we have asked you formally, because remember last time we didn't have the numbers, right? We had asked John to produce this report. He did not have the numbers at that meeting. He gave us these numbers for this meeting. We have all agreed that these are the numbers we want to advance in the ordinance. So now it is John's job to put these numbers in the new ordinance.
No, that's no.
No, we had first introduction, it'd be a substantial change, Steve. You have to be careful when you do a substantial change.
This
It's
would be
essentially
deja
a-
vu.
it
This is what
becomes a
happened
new-
last
it
meeting.
becomes a new ordinance.
So the question is that the report that you wrote on August 25th, 2017, and it contained certain bulk standards, are they incorporated into the ordinance that is known as 366B-17?
They are, with just a couple of exceptions, they are.
Okay, so, and what are those exceptions?
The exceptions, as I mentioned in my...
John, is that mic on?
The exceptions that were mentioned in my report were due to...
Wait a minute, John, can you hear him in the back? No.
Can you hear me now? Okay. The exceptions that we talked about in my report were that were related to minimal setback standards, which if you look on table 1 of the report, it was 50 feet in the Kaplan Site 1, and the current borough standards is 50 feet. There were also standards of 25 feet in Kaplan Site 1 and 20 feet in Kaplan Site 2 and 45 feet in Kaplan Site 2, which was as close as I could get. Plus, we have in Kaplan Site 2, that's adjacent to a 100-foot railroad easement.
which
So-
is all the more reason to have a buffer. We went through this years ago when they tried to institute the MOM
They
rail
don't
line.
utilize this railroad spur.
Pardon me?
They don't utilize the railroad spur. The railroad spur is further over, if you look on the map. It's a side spur, I believe. There's nothing there. The railroad spur is over further.
You telling me that rail line isn't active?
No, I don't know if the rail line is active
I
in
will
that
tell
area.
you
There's
that rail line
nothing
is
there
active.
right now.
Mrs. Mahoney, who lives there and is woken up by it, will tell you that that rail line
But
is active.
we're not talking...
The fact that there is an active rail line there is a reason, unless I'm missing something, is a reason
on the
to have
tax
a
map.
greater buffer, not a smaller buffer.
We're giving...
I don't think you have to know a lot about planning to know that, do you?
John, what is your
The other
recommendation?
area we talked about that we don't make is the minimum distances between buildings. So, for instance...
John, you gotta hold the mic.
For instance, we had said have the Kaplan site have, it's a function of the height of the building. So if the buildings are 36 feet high, we talk about the height being no more than 4 stories. But these are going to be townhouse or flats, a combination. So it's going to be something on the order of 35 or 36 feet, I believe.
I don't think that's correct. And if
Oh.
you look at the standard now...
Oh, no, I'm not talking about the
a four-story
standard.
building will not be 36 feet
No,
high.
no. Talking about the concept plan we have for this. I used the same multifamily housing standards we have with the seniors, because it's applicable and it's in the ordinance already. We just are using these for affordable housing, multifamily. So we don't make some of the standards in there. Now, we could change that to what the standards are, which are front to front or front to end or front to rear is supposed to be 2 times the height, whatever the height is, all right? So if you use 36 feet, that would be 72 feet. The rear to rear and or the end would be 1.5 feet times the height. So if you use that, that would be 54 feet, let's say, if you assume 36 feet. Just assuming, because that's what we have on the concept plan presented by the applicant, Kaplan.
So that we all understand what Mr. Leon Cavella just said is we are writing this ordinance to match the concept plan that Mr. Kaplan
No, I
submitted.
didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said we have standards. I was given some instructions. I assumed that what was happening in accordance with Mr. DuPont and Mr. Sachs is a strategy. You know, so what Mr. Sachs told me to do for the litigation, I was not privy to. I was not in the special sessions in the judge's chamber.
We never had it in the judge's chambers. We had an open,
I don't know.
We had an open court last time.
Well,
we weren't in chambers. You weren't there at the last
I know I wasn't
hearing.
there because Mr. Sachs said I didn't have to go there because.
So what I'm trying to get at here is that you made the changes, but you could not make the changes in table 1, the first one, and then the minimum distance, right? The minimum setback and the minimum distance. Is that accurate?
I made the changes. I was asked, my understanding from the council was to produce, after you talked about the changes that were there or were not there, you said produce a report. So I produced a report and showed on table 1 that 80% of the changes or the standards were the same as the bulk standards. 20% were not. Those 20% dealt with minimum setbacks.
And the minimum distance.
And the minimum distances.
Okay.
Could we change those? Sure we could. Yes, we could.
But I thought that's what
And
the
I-
directive was to
Well-
change them. That was my directive, to change them. I have it, it's right here, I mean.
It does say it in your report, the direction for the Borough Council was to
So
apply all
what
situations.
is,
Whoa, whoa,
Jim,
whoa, whoa.
you want to wrap it up and we'll go
Well,
to what the
excuse me,
council wants? No, I'm not
Yes,
saying
Mayor,
we're
we
not
are gonna
talking
do this.
about
We need to discuss
but
it.
We have a 3-way, 4-way
I understand,
conversation
Mayor.
going.
I
so
understand.
Now we need to determine what we want to do. So do you want to conclude what you were, your statement or your question?
Well,
Jim?
one of the things I think that the people should know, this is arcane, what we're talking about. We're talking about doubling the setback, the minimum setback. Everywhere else in town, the current borough my math is off. It's worse than doubling. The current borough standard is 50 feet. We're going to reduce it to 20 feet. So in the highest buildings we have in town, with the greatest population, a density of maybe 16 per acre, the distance, the setback is going to be 20 feet. The distance, the end-to-end distance is going to go from 1 times the height, which might be 40 feet or 50 feet. If you now remember, we're talking a 4-story building here. We're going to take that from 40 or 50 feet to 20 feet. And it goes on like that. So what we are doing, we are going to have people literally and figuratively living on top of one another.
Okay, anything else, Jim?
Well, I did want to bring up something on the intervener, if I might, Mayor.
Can we
Let's
do this
let's
first
Okay,
and
I'll
bring
come
it
deal
back up?
with this and then.
I'll
and
come
then
back
I'll
then.
call you back.
All right, but I would
All right.
appreciate it if the council would consider this, and if amendments are appropriate, amendments should be made.
Okay.
And
thank-
I just want to say
I'll
this.
call you
The
back.
council directed one thing. Mr. Leon Cavella said he did what he was told, so it seems like Mr. Sachs is running the borough of Saraville. And respectfully, he ain't doing a very good job.
We'll take it. Okay, thanks, Jim.
Can we
All
have
right,
this-
so, Steve, as the one planner on the governing body, I need you to, what are we looking to accomplish here?
Whoa.
No,
Okay.
no, I know what we're looking to accomplish.
I'll sit back, and when he gets done,
but
I'll tell you
I
what
need
I'm
the-
trying
I
to
need the-
accomplish.
I need the specifics of what,
It is my understanding, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I believe we're in agreement here that in order for this ordinance to pass and for us to be in compliance with the court, they would like Kaplan Site 1 and Kaplan Site 2 to match the current borough standards for setbacks, building cover, etc. So essentially, in layman terms, column 1 and 2 should match column 3.
Counselor?
That's accurate. That's accurate.
All right.
I went to college for 7 years to know that.
John, can you do that?
I did that in a copy of the 366B-17. I was told by the attorney, Mr. Sachs, directing the litigation, that I should supply a copy without any other changes except the elimination and deletion of Section K for now. That's what I did. I have the other copy
No,
right
I understand, and Mr. Sachs has you know, he's been a good attorney for us, and he's not here to participate in this
Correct.
conversation. You are a counselor, and I assume this has to do with strategy.
Well, again, I think what we can do this evening is you know, we got this introduction. It is on for the 25th. We can, you know, vote for the adoption of the existing 366B17. You also have the right to amend it, right? Well, what I would recommend first is that you first vote on 366B17, up or down, and then if...
We did that.
Right, no, on the 25th, for the final adoption. And then, should that should that not pass, or if it does pass, then the other question that I'm going to provide to you is moot, is that you can then authorize me to amend 366B17 to include the two, Mr. Leon Cavello apparently already has the amended ordinance to include the minimum setbacks of 50 feet and the minimum distance between buildings in accordance with the standards that were standard, I guess, if that's correct.
But I would have a strategy issue. I would have a strategy question at that point, at this point, to just, you know, go further on to that.
Yes, and what I'll do is that
Before we go further tonight. I
when
need to
Mr. Sachs gets back from his daughter's wedding, I will have an opportunity to talk to Mr. Sachs, Mr. Leon Cavello, and also Susan Gruhl regarding you know, your intentions and wishes and instructions with respect to those two other bulk standards that need to be revised.
But I have a question that I don't know if it could be out in the public because it's a strategic question.
At this point in time, what I would suggest is that I think you've given me a pretty clear indication of what you want 366B17 to address. I think any further discussion will only, I guess not inflame, but certainly cause additional confusion. I don't think there's any further discussions that's necessary. I think that, you know, I had reported back to Mr. Sachs, or just emailed him while I was up here, that, you know, it had been introduced. That being said, I think it's pretty clear to Mr. Leon Cavello as to what the instructions are with respect to amending the bulk standards on those two paragraphs, in particular, the minimum setback and the minimum distance between buildings. That's what I represented to the court was going to be done. That's one of the reasons why I upheld my opinion that it was substantial in nature and that we changed it. So I just think that we need final tweaking of those two paragraphs.
I concur.
All right.
Is the governing body okay with this?
I can't sit up here knowing that there's an ordinance that we asked last meeting to have bulk standards set And again, my comments about the ordinance were that I wanted to make sure that my voting yes was to make sure that the bulk standards were met. And this council gave direction, and that was wiped clear. The attorney who represents the zoning board, formerly the planning board, wiped that clear. He's not elected by this council. He doesn't live in this town. We gave the direction. And again, I don't see myself voting yes for this ordinance the way it's written. And I know there was other comments up here as well.
You voted on it.
It
You
has,
introduced it.
Second reading, I said.
The introduction has already taken place. I think that when you vote against it on the 25th, you can announce the reasons for it, and we will include the revisions that Mr. Leon Cavello has been instructed to include. I think that's the most important thing. And those are the two remaining bulk standards that apparently were not incorporated into it, namely the minimum setback and the minimum distance between buildings.
Is there any possibility of motion to reconsider? Voting this down? Changing it tonight? And then voting on it again?
Well, again, I would not recommend that because I don't think that that's, in my opinion, that's a substantial change that you would have to notice. Remember the last council meeting I was...
But this is just introduction. There was no notice.
There was a notice. There was a notice. Well, right. There's two things. There was a notice that this was going to be introduced, and it was set forth in that notice what that ordinance was. There was also. It is strictly for just introduction.
But if we don't change it now, we
Right.
can't change it
And
in 2 weeks.
I agree with you.
So.
And what you're doing, though, is you're changing it, though, from 25 feet to 50 feet, and then from 1.5 to 2.HT, or to
No,
2.
that's just
2.0.
2 times
Right.
the height.
Two times the height.
Counselor, this goes back to a conversation we had last week where I had questioned whether there was a substantial change or not when we removed letter K.
Right.
We had, I guess, eventually determined it was a Scrivener's error. It was not a substantial change because it no longer addressed a property that was in the ordinance. It seems to me that that's the same situation we have tonight, which
Well,
would lend me
it
to
is, and that's
support-
why I'm a little on the fence on this, because remember at the last council meeting, we changed a lot. We changed K, and then we changed A through
But
J.
what you had said at the last
We
meeting.
told him to change it, but he
Right.
didn't.
Wait, what you said at the last meeting was that because the change was for the benefit of the borough, that it should be considered and advanced. This is a similar situation. I apologize.
Right, and so my opinion is
It
that
was
since-
accepted, and that's what we did.
Well, but the difference was that we were making
We're
a lot of
changing two
changes.
numbers for the benefit of the borough.
Here, if Mr. Leon Cavello is admitting that it was a Scrivener's error, and that the minimum setback should be 50, and the minimum distance between buildings should be 2 times height, and that was a Scrivener's error because he changed everything else. It was 80%. Mr. Leon Cavello just indicated that 80% of the changes were incorporated in 366
With all
B17.
due respect, this isn't a matter of 2 or 3 changes, okay? Because you have 2 sites here. So you have under Kaplan 1 site, 1, 2, 3 changes. Under Kaplan 2 site, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 changes, according to what I have here in front of me. Okay, so if that's not a significant change, I don't know what is.
Well, I think though that what I'm just referring to are the bulk standards. I'm not changing the Kaplan 1 or Kaplan 2. I am merely just changing. I don't have 366B17 in front of me, but the changes that I'm referring to are just the minimum setback and the minimum distance. I am not specifically referring to changes to Kaplan 1 and Kaplan 2.
No, that's what I'm referring to. If you look at, if I'm looking at the same table everybody else is, It is on, actually. I don't know what's
Mr.
going on.
Leon
That's a whole
Covello,
nother
where would
problem.
those changes, if you were going to, if there was a Scribner's error with respect to the minimum setback and minimum distance between buildings, where on the introduced ordinance of 366B17 does your copies have that?
Well, the one we just
There are
voted.
10 subsets under the table. All right? That's minimum setbacks, maximum building coverage, maximum building height, floor plans, landscaping, off-site parking. Under the minimum distance between buildings, there's conditions for three
G.
circumstances. all
So
right?
G- so
That's
are-
part of the subset. I didn't include it as separate. They're going to change altogether, or they're not going to change altogether.
So are you saying, are you
All
saying?
but one would
Wait,
change.
let Mr. Leon Cavello finish. Go ahead, John.
And the last column on the right says current borough standards. That was what the council directed, either current borough standards or better,
Exactly.
right? So that's what I did.
So are you?
I have to reiterate, I got direction from the director who's doing the litigation.
So are you saying that the standards should have been 50 feet and the minimum setback and the minimum distance between buildings should be 2 times height?
I changed those. I have a copy here. We can make copies if you want to give everybody. But then I was told not to utilize that and just make the one change to subsection K.
Well, if that's a script, I'm sorry, what, Ms. Councilman?
I mean, I know what you have there. What you have there before you is what we asked you to do. You're saying you have a copy of the changes that we recommended, but that's not what we have here.
And that's what should have been in the
And
ordinance,
that's what should have been
Councilwoman.
here.
Councilwoman.
Yes.
That's what should have been in the ordinance.
Exactly.
Well, what should have been in the ordinance needs to be taken up with Mr. Sachs.
Well,
and
clearly,
Mr. and
well,
Mr.
No,
Dupont.
no, that's not.
Well, that's what we're here today to do, to correct that.
Honestly,
Up to us.
we gave a directive at this council to Mr. Leon Cavello.
Every one of us.
Every one of us.
Can I ask a question before you continue? This is litigation for the borough,
Yes.
correct? Am I supposed to go when the director of this litigation, an attorney in the state of New Jersey, tells me, do this, am I supposed to say, I'm not going to do that because the council has directed me? His
Yes.
That's
Yes.
right.
We're
Okay,
your
That's
boss.
I
right,
did
'cause
that.
we're his boss.
I asked him that question, and he says, "Don't." It's
Oh, my God.
it's part of the strategy, as Mr. Dupont said. It is, and that's what am I going to do?
Mr., I think what we
I
can.
understand
let-
where
I
you're coming
did.
from.
If you want, I have that copy. I made all the changes.
Mr. Leon Cavella, I want to say this to you. You were put in one hell of a position. And I think everybody here as residents see exactly what kind of shenanigans have been going on for how long? Back in February. You're seeing it play out right now. Imagine what some of us were feeling as things were coming through. And I think that in the back of many people's minds that were much more in the know than us, we're saying, throw it to them. They're the elected people. Let them wear it. But what they didn't expect was for us to turn around, read, research, and figure out what the hell is going on. And you guys are watching this play out before your very eyes. Every single time we come here, there's a new layer of this stinky onion that keeps getting pulled back. I'm not going to stop. Residents here aren't going to stop. Let's see what next time brings, because it's interesting.
I think I have a solution. In light of the fact that that Mr. Leon Cavello made 80% of the changes but did not make these 2 changes, what I would suggest is that there's made a motion to withdraw the introduced ordinance, and then there be another motion to amend to include the Scribner's, or to amend the Scribner's error that includes the minimum setback.
Is there a Scribner's
not a
error here,
Scribner's
John?
error.
It's not an error.
No,
And if
there-
I,
all right, so-
can I make
so
a point?
again-
Can I make another
Hold on,
point?
hold on a
So,
minute.
so
Can
if
I
I,
make a-
if,
Wait, wait a minute.
if
I'd
I
like
would,
to hear.
if I
We
could,
have
if I
everybody
could, if
talking.
I could. So if 80% of the changes were made and these 20% were not changed, what I would suggest is that we then, right, a motion to reconsider the introduced ordinance of 366B17. all right? And that would then amend the 366B17, would amend the minimum setback and increase the setback from 25 to 50, or 25 to 50, and then the minimum distance is 1.5 to 2. Is that correct, Mr. Leoncovello?
Yes. With one note and comment, if I may, can I interrupt for a
Please
second?
go ahead, John.
The 80% is talking about 80% of the bulk requirements were made already. We're in compliance with the borough standards. We're not changes. 80% of the changes were not made. They were already the bulk standards in accordance, and there was only 20% that had to be changed. That's not what Mr. DuPont just said.
So we can make those changes.
Wait a minute, let me ask Mr. Leoncovello, is there a Scribner's error here?
No, well,
Okay.
I was...
As I understand it, you received instructions from the governing body for these bulk standards. You created 2 documents, one which was exactly the way the council asked you to do it, and you were told by the attorney representing the borough that was appointed by the governing body not to do it and to give him the original version. So we have 2 attorneys that are representing us before the judge, our borough attorney, and then our specialist, Mr. Sachs. So these are the people that are telling you, bring down the watered version and do not bring the tighter.
I don't, that's, no. I had no conversations with Mr. Leoncovello. What I am saying
Yeah,
today.
but you have conversations with Mr. Sachs. You're supposed to be
Well, I appreciate that, Mayor.
representing us
Mayor, and
doing this.
I did, and that's the basis of me standing up before the court and advising them that there was substantial changes going to be made and there was going to be revisions to the ordinance. So what I am suggesting now is that we make a motion to amend the introduced ordinance 366B17 to modify or amend that ordinance to include the setback to 50 feet and to include the minimum distance between buildings of 2 times the height.
But isn't that what we did last time?
Those two changes were not made.
So what's going to stop it from?
Do you have an ordinance written the way we asked you to do?
Yes.
Can you show that?
Yeah, make copies of that, would you?
Do you have a number of copies, Mr. Leoncovello?
I believe I do.
This is a sad day. This is a sad day in Saraville.
It's just very frustrating when we're being, yeah, they're talking about railroads, we're being railroaded.
As we sit here and wait for the copies to be made or disseminated, can we take a recess, please?
Take a 5-minute recess.
Second.
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. You know, I'm really pissed at you. Leading us to a terrible place in court this way.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Doug.
Hang in there.
See, this paragraph G changed.
The shame is they knew this well in May of 2016.
That's fine. The front to the rear or front to the right, 2 times height.
I'm really sick and tired of you looking over my shoulder all the time.
Steve?
I'm gonna move it.
I have great concern that the judge. Yep. That's what I texted my wife, told her.
I had hopes that this one wouldn't be bad. So much for that.
I know. Well, this is beyond silly.
I'm gonna do whatever. I'm gonna try to get it voted on. Is it a matter?
So hot, yep. No. Mm-hmm. Yes, I would.
I can't.
we just witnessed and we just heard is disturbing on so many levels. At least we know who, somebody else that's running the town.
Where's Dan? Officer, would you ask Dan Frankel to come back in?
That's a good thing. Well, you've always we tend to have our favorites. Years ago,
That's what it's all about.
That's right. Vacate the introduction of 366B, and then we're gonna amend it. Well, you could, but I think the gesture is vacate 366B one, and then this will be amended, then introduce Right, and then that'll pass, and then we'll adopt 366 amended. Not adopted, but
Okay, we ready, everyone? Take a motion to go back into open.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Can I
Okay,
vote?
Counselor?
Yeah, Mayor, you have in front of you a ordinance known as 366B17 amended, right? This is an ordinance that has been prepared by Mr. Leon Covello and has included the changes that include the minimum setback to 50 and the minimum distance buildings to two times height. Now, what I would suggest from a procedural point of view is that there be a motion to withdraw the introduction or vacate the introduction of ordinance 366B17. Then once that is made and seconded and voted on and approved, then there needs to be a motion to introduce ordinance 366B17 amended. So what I would suggest, and I'd ask someone to make a motion to vacate or withdraw the introduction of 366B17.
So moved.
Is there a second? Roll call?
Mr. Buchanan.
Councilpersons Novak,
Yes.
Buchanan,
Yes.
Grillo,
Yes.
Kilpatrick,
Hang on a second.
We're just
It's a
vacating.
vacate, yes.
Okay.
Lembo,
Yes.
Melendez,
Yes.
Now, the next motion will be to introduce ordinance 36617 amended. And that ordinance has been prepared by Mr. Leon Cavallo and presented to you just a few minutes ago.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Novak,
Yes.
Grillo?
You skip Buchanan, but yes.
Buchanan?
Yes.
Kilpatrick?
Yeah, this is to introduce, are we gonna?
This is just introducing, this
Just
is the,
introduce.
this is the amended ordinance that includes 100% of the increased bulk standards.
Yeah, I'm just reviewing it, so,
This is just introduced.
okay, yes to introduce.
Lembo?
With the changes made, I'll vote to introduce, yes.
Melendez?
Yes.
Now, can we discuss just, I know we voted to introduce, can we just discuss one thing? I just want to look at something here.
Well, can we carry this over to the workshop, because we're still in open public portion?
I don't know, I mean, if we turn around, no, I don't want to. I want to just get clarification on just
Mr. Leon
something.
Cavello, to all the changes, and Ms. Councilwoman Kilpatrick is looking at to make sure that all of the changes were made in accordance with your report as it pertains to the minimum setback and the minimum distance. It's your representation that all the changes were made with respect to the minimum setback and the minimum distance between buildings, and that's outlined in paragraph G, correct? And it's also outlined in paragraph A. Paragraph G, yes, and A.
Yes.
Yes. Right. So both of those are changes that we discussed were not included in 366B17, but now are included in 366B17 amended, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back to the public portion. Jim, oh, yes, come on up, Bonnie.
Good evening, me again. Ruth Ann Mahoney, 2 Gerard Place, Parlin. I guess I won't go into the bulk variance and standards, we've done that already. But I was here that they would be the standard at the very least. Another concern is the prime property on North Ernston. I keep saying, please, please leave it prime. It's important that it be prime. Maybe 3 weeks ago, we were out and we were coming home and it had rained heavily and we couldn't go down North Ernston past, we got to the ShopRite and we had to turn around because it was flooded. Now, what's going to happen? That was before any changes are made where Pizza Hut is or where the prime and the wetlands are. What is going to happen when the building happens? Is it going to be worse? I mean, you're talking, you have the pond there or swamp, whatever, and I see problems. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a planner, I'm just a regular person, but I can foresee more flooding happening. Doesn't happen often, but it was very, very bad. That's a concern. Another concern is there's apartments in Sayreville that have been ready for occupancy for a very long time. They're not occupied. You see signs out, Camelot specials for moving in. And now we're going to build many more. And many more include a railroad. And I've been here before and said, the railroad makes a lot of noise. If we can't get rid of or rent, shouldn't say rid of, if we can't rent what's here, how are we going to rent more? I don't quite understand that. And there'll be, of course, more children, needing of more schools and other services. I have a problem seeing where the town is not working together. It seems to be working in different directions. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. I'm not going to come to a meeting. Does everybody have the borough of Sayreville in their heart? Or is it just for themselves? I'm out to make a name for myself. And that's what I'm beginning to think, that there are people out to make a name for themselves. which is not why they should be here, voted in, or appointed. They should be here because they want to be here and help the residents of Sayreville. Let's see. My one other thing is based sort of on that. I haven't, people are voted in to represent the people of Sayreville, and appointed by members to help with Sayreville. I haven't seen anybody up here who has spoken to the fact that they want the building to happen. Everybody who has spoken does not want all this marketable rate housing. Nobody has come here and said, build more, build more, build more. Haven't heard it. And my one other thing is a safety issue, and I don't know who to address it to. That's why my husband was out, and he said by where Pizza Hut is or was, in the grassy area between the street and the sidewalk, there's angle iron and pipe. I have pictures on my phone sticking up. And his concern is that children walking to school there, or people walking to the bus, or just out for a walk to the park, or just out for a walk, somebody's going to trip maybe and get hurt because the angle iron is sharp.
Might be the remnants of an old
It
sign.
looks like a remnants of sign, but we don't know who was
We'll have it
responsible.
looked at in the morning.
Okay, thank you. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jim?
There's people that didn't even speak.
Thank you again, Mayor. And picking up on what Mrs. Mahoney said, the council did come together. They voted unanimously to amend that ordinance. So I thank you very, very much. And I think while I don't want these built, but if they are to be built, it's better that they be built to better standards. So I thank the members of the governing body very much for that. I would make one suggestion, Mr. DuPont. As you know, under the municipal land use law, the planning board has 45 days to review proposed ordinances. So I would suggest that there be a motion to send that to them immediately, because what could happen, in New Jersey we have the time of decision law, or time of decision rule rather, what could happen is somebody could come in with an application before these kick in the way we want them to. So I would suggest this be sent to the governing body,
We'll send it
board as
to
soon
for
as
the
possible.
review, but that's it. We have no problem
Okay.
sending it to the review, but I think we're set with respect to, they've already commented on it. I don't need them to comment on it further on this, but I do think that we could send it to the planning board.
Okay, so I thank you for that. Wayne, if you know, who is the biggest property taxpayer in the borough?
Hillside Estates.
Hillside Estates, which is Winding Wood.
Correct.
Okay, I thought so. So you know, there were some comments made before about that. So it's important to know that while I do send kids, they are the biggest single property taxpayer in the borough. Tell you something else just to correct the record. There was never a referendum on the town buying the YMCA. People think that. People think there was a referendum on building a community center. Neither one of those things happened. Sometimes in history, people get confused. So I just wanted to correct the record on that. But I do want to talk about the intervener, because I don't know an awful lot about that. And did I understand that 2 folks have applied to be interveners?
Yes, National Ed and Sarah.
Okay.
And there's not going to be, I'm not going to talk about the substance of those
Sure,
motions.
I understand that. I'm going to talk about interveners in general, I guess, then, because I wouldn't want to jeopardize your strategy. Now, the NL, I assume, would be the property that we call Oak Street that Mr. K wants to build on, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
I don't have the pleadings in front of me, but I believe that's the proper
Okay, all right. So
identification if it's been changed.
just to put things in perspective here, the 2 folks who are and Sarah is the other one, and I support that. That makes a lot of sense. I advocated for that, as did others. The 2 people, and people should know this about interveners. When I asked, well, how is Kaplan getting to put 300 units there? Well, he's an intervener. he got these special rights because he's an intervener. So when you're an intervener, you get a lot more rights than when you just come before the board. So it's
if I might, Mr.
Yes.
Robinson, it's important to note that he filed within the time period.
Sure, I understand that.
okay.
I understand that. But there's they have special rights. I mean, the ordinance that you just spent all this time discussing, and at the last meeting, I mean, he's going to build more units than he would otherwise build if he were not an intervener. So it's important. They have a special status. So the two folks who are interveners, Kaplan and perhaps Kay, if that is the same property, are the same two folks who on Gondek Drive, whatever that was called, Golden Age, is not putting affordable housing.
Yep.
And Kaplan, who at Heritage, down at the other Camelot, is not putting in affordable housing. So, but now they are both seeking a special status where they can put plenty of housing, a lot more housing than they would otherwise be able to put. There's just something wrong with that. It doesn't make sense. Now, and you talked about the doctrine of res judicata, which pretty much I think we all understand. One of the things that would make this different, and you talked about that in reference to Mako. Mako filed to be an intervener, and the borough opposed it, and it was not granted. And the doctrine of res judicata means if there's something new, he can file again. Well, there is something new. He won that case. There's something substantially new. He won the right to build. You remember that case? It cost the town $1.4 million to defend, and we lost it. And he won the right to build 200 homes there.
Yeah,
I would say...
Mr. Robinson, that wasn't a motion to intervene. That was a motion, that was a prerogative writ.
No, I understand that. The two different cases. What I'm saying is res judicata may apply in this because circumstances on whatever he has there, 150,
Yeah, a lot of acres.
whatever acres he has there, changed. So he might now be able to come in as an intervener. And what I would suggest, and I support the Housing Authority coming in, or Sarah coming in as an intervener, I would suggest that the borough likewise, just as you objected to Mr. Mako being an intervener, object to NL being an intervener. I think you should object to anybody who is a private intervener, who is not a public intervener, because we spent the last hour discussing the special status that interveners have. You know, we heard at the last meeting that Susan Gruhl was able to find where 116 units didn't have to be built in Melrose. And a lot of us went out of this room saying, hey, that's pretty good. That's a victory. That's 116 less apartments we're going to have in the borough of Sayreville. Now...
No, I don't think that's what that said, Jim. The number from the court is still the same. The question just is where are they going to be built?
Yeah, the number from the courts is still the 785. Yes, you're right.
That doesn't change.
No, but we get what happened there. Susan, if you read her email, Susan Gruhl got us more credits, so we don't need more. I have a copy of the email if you'd like to see it.
I do.
Okay. Got us more credits, so that is fewer market rate apartments that we will have to build.
7 times.
7 times, that's right. Okay, however, now if somebody comes in as an intervener, they have that elevated status where they get their own special setbacks. Because if they don't have those setbacks, they won't be able to build as many homes as they want to build and make as much money as they want to make.
I want to rape the town.
So this is, let's be mindful of one thing. I've been coming here since February because I've been concerned about this. Nobody is concerned about affordable housing. I didn't hear one person say they were concerned about affordable housing. Somebody said at the planning board meeting that I was concerned about 45 units of affordable housing in my neighborhood. I'm not concerned about 45 units of affordable housing in my neighborhood. I'm not concerned about 90 units of affordable housing in my neighborhood or 100 units of affordable housing in my neighborhood. I'm concerned about 300 units of anything where it doesn't fit on the property, where you don't have appropriate setbacks, where you have environmental concerns, where you have traffic considerations, where you have winding roads. That's what I'm concerned about. So I would respectfully suggest that, and maybe the council should take a position on this, anybody who is not a public intervener, such as Sarah, the borough should object to that, just as they objected to Mr. Mako being an intervener. Okay? That's my only point on that. I appreciate what you did. I'm sorry that took as long as it did before with the standards. But when these things are built, they're going to be there for a very, very long time. So an hour of your time tonight, well, I apologize for keeping you here, I think is going to result in a much better project, which I hope will not be built. But if it is, it ought to be the best project imaginable. And I think I forwarded to a lot of you pictures of what they're doing in Perth Amboy. Beautiful construction there. Beautiful construction.
One for one.
That they got with not a dime of local taxpayer money. And I am happy that the Housing Authority is going in that direction. I'm happy that Sarah is going in that direction. I'm happy that some members of the council are going in that direction. I hope that meeting will be rescheduled so that everybody can be back on board and we can all be going in the same direction so that little old Saraville can do something as wonderful. And if you haven't viewed Willow Pond, the villages at Willow Pond in Perth Amboy or Parkview, you really should go down there. I had Commissioner Olszewski brought me down there last week. Beautiful, beautiful. And the density is appropriate. They are wonderful facilities. You would be proud to have your relatives, your parents living there. Not a dime of municipal money went into them. They got grants. They were creative, they were smart, they put their minds to it, and it's a credit to that community. And we should be able to do that or better here in this community. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Yes, young lady. Well, okay. Young fella, you're next after this young lady. Come on. No. After this lady.
I'm Pam Malik. I'm here to personally thank the
We
council
can't hear you.
for helping. I'm Pam Malik. I live on Smith Street in Saraville. I had a problem with my curbing in front of the house, and I want to thank the council who personally for helping me to take care of that problem. But I also mentioned that I had a plumber come out because I had a sewer problem backup, and I know that there was 4 water main breaks on my street, which they took care of, but I'd like to be reimbursed for having a plumber come out and take care of mine. So I brought the bill, and I'd appreciate the consideration to be repaid.
Let me give it to the business.
Yeah, Mayor, that actually would come to me. We had spoke with Mrs. Malik. We told her if she had damage to send a copy of a bill to our office. We'll forward it to the contractor. Well, my inspector met with you and explained that that's the process. Okay. Well, if you hand it in, we'll take care of it. If you provide a copy of the bill, we will go through and forward it to the contractor. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Howdy, what a night. Haven't been to a borough council in a while, but thank you. Thank you for the education. My name's Gary Novak. I live in Morgan, Dolan Avenue. Been there for 40 years, okay? No relation. It's with a W versus a V. So, been there for 40 years, and I know I sent a letter to your office requesting interest in purchasing the property on Mason Avenue behind my house. Okay, Dolan Avenue, small street, been there forever. We're the only ones that don't own that piece of property. Faces Ale House now. and I want to preserve it. I don't want to build on it, okay? I want to keep it tree-like, but it's overgrown, my property, neighbors' properties, et cetera. So I just wanted to, you know, I know I got a letter saying, well, not at this time, so I just wanted to know why not, you know? Going through the life, you know, we don't want to move. We want to stay in Saraville. Love Saraville, you know? Grown, seen it grow, lived it, played it, and probably going to be buried in St. Stan's here, so, with the rest of my family. So I just want to request to have a consideration on, you know, possibly the opportunity to do so.
The Open Space Committee did have a written report on that. We're going to meet next week. I'm going to get a copy of that, and I'll bring that in, okay?
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes.
Ruth Ann Mahoney, 2 Gerard Place, Portland. I forgot one thing. Just would like to say, I would like Saraville to take back Saraville and not the builders. Stop them somehow, but take Saraville back. My only other comment is, I hope someone is able to ask the attorney what happened and why the directions he gave. He knows that's not what happens in East Brunswick. He lives there. So I think we need to take Saraville back.
Are there any other questions or comments? Being no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, while Terry's handing out the workshop agenda,
The mayor's going to run to the bathroom. The mayor's going to take this opportunity to run to the bathroom. He figured too many people were running there before. Oh boy, poor Mike. Okay, no changes on this, right, Tara? Thank you. I still had notes I jotted on here.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. All stand for a salute to our flag.
Just give me a second.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all, born and unborn.
Statement of publication.
Take notice that this agenda session of the Mayor and Borough Council being held at this 11th day of September 2017 has been advertised and posted in accordance with Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975.
Roll call.
Councilpersons Buchanan, Grillo,
Yeah, manager.
Gilpatrick,
Here.
Lembo, Melendez,
Here.
Novak.
Here.
Okay, under old business,
All right, we killed that. Okay.
we just, any questions or comments? All right, let's go to
As a-
committee reports, communication, administration of finance.
Yes, Mayor. I move that the minutes and the departmental reports as listed under A on the agenda be received and filed.
Second.
Okay, anything else, Mary?
Yes, under B, applications for a bingo and raffle license for the senior citizens approved.
Any objections? Next item.
C, application received for the pool and billiard parlor Snookers.
Any
For 19
objection?
pool tables.
Next item.
Okay, D, JCP&L is got a petition filed for a hearing. Is that's going to be posted on the bulletin board? Thank you. A notice of retirement received from Marcus McManus of Omnibus Driver and Office on Aging, effective October 1st. Was that
All right,
something
anything else, Mary?
Yes, just one thing. I talked to Wayne, and, no, maybe I talked to Jay, about Pulaski Avenue. Sometime this week, hopefully, or next 2 weeks, you can meet with Wayne and talk about the ordinance for the funding for Pulaski Avenue, because we're in a position now where we could be moving forward on this.
You can do that, sure.
So we can have the ordinance for the next meeting?
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Jay, as long as you're discussing Pulaski Avenue, you have that short amount of space on Coolots Lane, and everybody who lives down there bitterly complains to me about the part between Washington Road and where the money came in to pave Coolots Lane through its entirety. Let's get that done, because it's just beyond the ability to patch it where it's acceptable.
Well, we'd have to do a whole new ordinance if Coolest Lane wasn't in our ordinances
for
for
next
paving.
year.
Oh,
For
for
next
next year.
year.
Oh, no problem.
I mean, if by chance we have the money this year, that would be even better.
No, we're a
Okay,
little
anything
short.
else, Mary?
No, that's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Planning and zoning, Pat Limbaugh.
Thank you, Mayor. Move the following minutes and reports be received and filed. Planning Board minutes of August 2nd and the Middlesex County Planning Board minutes of June 13th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Next item?
Also to receive and file notice to adjacent property owners received from Salvatore Alfieri, attorney on behalf of Pure Events Center, an application before the Planning Board on September 20th for premises known as Route 35, Block 424 and Block 425, for the Planning Board to consider and determine the continuity of the change of use as previously approached as a club with conditions.
Anything else?
Other than that, progress, Mayor.
Thank you. Public safety, Councilman Grillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following minutes be received and filed. The Middlesex County Solid Waste Advisory Council meeting minutes of July 13th, 2017.
Second.
I'm sorry, June 13th, 2017.
Next item?
A notice of retirement received from Patricia Kugel in the municipal court effective October 1st, 2017.
Next item?
And a notice of expulsion of firefighter Lucas Perez due to violation company bylaws and not meeting terms of probation.
Anything else, Councilman?
Just a couple things. The first one is the Board of Health meeting we had on September 7th. They had asked if the council would permit Mr. Dupont to draft a new ordinance or amend an ordinance that we have for our community pools. There's a $75 fee that's charged by the municipality, but we have to pay the county inspector to actually go and do it, but it's a one-time $75 fee. So regardless of how many times that inspector has to go back, if the community's in violation, we have to continue paying the county without bringing money in. So they want to debate what some other towns have done in terms of the pricing structure for violations, but they also wanted to see what the ordinance would look like. So I would like the council to permit Mr. Dupont to draft an ordinance. He and I have discussed it. He's familiar with the request, and I'm going to present it at the October Department of Health meeting, if there's no objection.
No objection. Go ahead.
Just a little announcement. The Morgan Community Alliance is going to be meeting October 3rd at 7 p.m. at the Ale House. We're having a neighborhood get-together for businesses and residents. So if anybody out there in television world is watching, if you live in Morgan, if you're interested, that's our second get-together, October 3rd, 7 p.m. at the Ale House. And I think the final thing, I want to thank you, Ms. Mahoney. You've been coming over and over and over again. And I know that this is a bit out of your element. You never probably thought you'd have to debate affordable housing. But you came up here before and you said, you know, you see that there's a lot of difficulty here. But I want you to know that there are Republicans, there are Hillary Democrats, there are Bernie Democrats. All six of us are sitting up here, and we don't agree all the time. But we do work, and we work really hard. And I think what you've seen here is that we're able to move these things forward, but it's really because of the community. And I think I speak for my colleagues when I say thank you to yourself and Mr. Robinson and everybody else that spent a lot of time. As hopefully we reach the conclusion of this effort, it's because we've been challenged by the people we represent. It's a great honor to represent 45,000 people, but it's a great responsibility as well. And so thank you for coming out here and challenging us, because that's what really matters. And one day we'll get you home before 8 o'clock. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Works, Councilwoman Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mayor. No minutes or departmental reports.
Okay.
Just two quick comments. We all here attended the 9/11 memorial service again this year after 16 years. It was, again, an absolutely beautiful ceremony, and repeatedly being told by many of the elected officials there that Saraville out of all of the towns, does by far one of the absolute best services and the most well-attended. And that just really speaks volumes to our community, to the people that are here, how much we continue to band together when times are difficult, but we also don't forget those that are no longer with us. And I know that Mr. Ken Kelly does not head those services anymore, but this year was absolutely fabulous, as it has always been, and my hat's off to Mr. Rob Bruce, who's now taken that up. So thank you for that. And in another exciting day, and I don't want to step on Councilman Melendez's rec,
I know it is.
but I had the opportunity, along with Councilwoman Novak, to attend the opening day for the Junior Bombers right over here at Borough Hall. And I honestly walked in there with the number of parents and kids and cheerleaders and football players. It was literally like attending a smaller version of our high school football games. And I could not have been more excited to see so many people cheering and happy and coming together. I spoke to a couple of the coaches. What we were able to do as a council together, bringing together the Parlin Panthers and the Leprechauns, to bring these kids to really say, it doesn't matter what uniform you're wearing, we're all here together. It was really quite a show of just unity and fun, and I could not have been happier, and I see it every day in the school now, and the kids are wearing those Junior Bomber uniforms,
They're excited.
and they are so proud to be in blue and gray at such a young age, and I can only imagine it will only strengthen us in our schools, at the high school and beyond. So thank you to everybody up here, because that was a joint effort from
was a
every
great
single
day.
one of us. It was a fabulous day.
Yep.
That's all.
Cheerleaders.
Progress.
Thank you.
Spectacular.
Recreation, Councilman Melendez.
No minutes and departmental reports. I have, Sunday was a great day.
It was great.
But this coming weekend, we have the car show, Saturday the 16th, 6 to 9 p.m. Last year, we had over 200 classic cars at the show. It's a big event, so please come out. And the following day is Cerebral Day. This year, it's a little bit later. We're starting 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Free rides for the kids, food, etc. This annual Hit the Bricks 5K run will be held October 7th at 9:30 a.m. at the Cerebral Rec soccer complex. Just a quick update. I said in the last meeting I'd give you guys an update on some technology projects we have going on in the project in the borough. The biggest one that everyone knows is the police radios. I say police, it's really public safety because it's EMS and it's fire. We're about 95% complete. There's 700 radios have been installed on the new system. Again, the 5% left is still some of the fire and EMS. It's about 35 devices. And, until that's complete, we're still technically on two systems. The two systems have to communicate with one another. And there's been some challenges with that, as with any technology. When you introduce new platforms, new systems, we went from an analog to digital. There's been some minor issues that have been well documented and tested, and the expectation is by the end of next month, we should be 100%. The final thing, there's still some things left to do, like the Middlesex County is our backup system. That connection hasn't happened yet. And once that is complete, then we'll have a full 100% backup. We'll be on our own standalone system like we promised, with Middlesex County as the backup. So we're pretty excited about that. Just the last thing, well, I have a couple more things. There's been some issues with the audio on TV. You've probably gotten some calls. And we were hoping to have that fixed by today, but it's actually an Optimum internet, the cable company. Right. So we're upgrading the actual encoders, which are digital devices that transform the analog audio into streaming media. And that should be done by next meeting. I know it's a big issue. And it made me think about, where we want to be long-term with what we do on TV. I mean, YouTube's great. Now, I think that's, I could blame technology for half the people being here now because, they get the opportunity to share what's going on. I think some of the enhancements people would love to see Ruth's face on TV, I think. I'm sure Ken looks great from the back, but we would like to look at his face. So we could do something with front and rear cameras. So I'm going to put a proposal together for next year, hopefully by January. Well, you're fabulous at what you do, so we'll make it really simple. But that's a thought that people
He's good.
were coming up with. And maybe some, I think every time people come and want to give a presentation, we don't have a laptop with a connection, so possibly maybe a screen in the front that people can see, and maybe one in the back for the council to see. So those are just some ideas. But that's part of the plan. I have a plan. Again, taking care of the big serious issues. One other issue that you've heard about the water treatment plant, how the reservoir is now a pool for some people and
And a fishing hole.
yeah. So I've met with the technology department. We met with Bob Smith, and he's he gave us some ideas of what he's looking for. So we went to market and we found a couple of firms. We have one that IT really wants to work with, that because the solution is going to be not just technology with cameras and that. I mean, there's a physical element that has to happen too with the fencing that needs to go into play. So we got it late, we just got it this week. It's a proposal from an IT firm called UTP that IT department wants to bring in. So I know it's not on the agenda today. It's actually on Dan's list to discuss, so I'm discussing it. I just don't know how to push it forward. Do we put it for the next meeting? Do we?
Well, you would need a resolution. The purchasing agent said she could have one prepared for next meeting in conformance with the non-fair and open process, okay? So we'll have that ready for the next meeting.
All right, and then we can get started, because it's going to be a phased process. It's not going to be done overnight, but part of the solution would be is similar to what we did with the senior center, where we have security elements that are fed back to PD. This is going to be the same type of system, but it's just a little bit more complex because it's water department. And my first reaction was just to do technology and like we normally do. However, DEP has a lot of standards now on protecting our water and our treatment plants, for example. So this firm actually does both. They do municipal type security as well as technology. So IT's comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with it. So I want to move that forward.
Thank you.
And
Oh,
I
you done?
think almost one
You got
thing.
more.
Really quick. There was a project that we started that I haven't really talked about. It's to digitize code enforcement. We're basically going to be taking years and years of analog paper files and scanning them and allowing them to be searchable for our code enforcement for now and for our residents for the future. So that already started. We're actually 75% finished. As we get closer, I will give a more productive update on how it's going to work and how it's going to benefit the borough.
Thank you.
Okay, Water and Sewer, Council President.
Thank you, Mayor. There's no reports. Letter B, we received notice of retirement from Guy Turgonski from the Water Department, Water and Sewer Departments. Receive and file.
Anything else?
That's a milestone. Change the date.
When was the last time you had to do that?
Yeah, oh, we hit a milestone here.
That was a long time since you had to do that.
Back in the 90s, we do it all.
First, I want to, recognize today's September 11th. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the event last night. I had a family wedding. But again, I heard it was a great event, and it always is a great event. And remembering those that were lost on that day throughout the country, and especially here in Saraville, we were all touched by it. And it's nice to reflect on their lives and where we've gone since then. Number two, also we've been keeping our thoughts and prayers those in Texas and in Florida getting hit with the hurricanes. We know too well the damage that hurricanes can cause, we all have family and friends around the country, and keep them in our thoughts and prayers as well. Lastly, we were talking earlier it was brought up about the special meeting with the organizations. My understanding, Sarah's going to send a contingent over here, and that's basically what we're looking for, just something to have a dialogue. Again, nothing where we're taking action, but dialogue between boards and organizations so that we can all be on the same page and not feel like we're working against each other or fighting each other. Know where everyone stands and make sure that Saraville is at heart and has the best interest, is being looked out for. So again, I would like to reschedule that meeting. Again, I discussed the the state statute that permits the planning board to come for advice, direction, just so that we're on the same page. It might not be strategic, what they were looking at, where we can go from here, which could cause problems, but more as advice and how we can go forward. I don't know what our schedules look like. I'm sure several of us have kids that are in school and they're back to school next week, and teachers have back to school, so we have to be cognizant of that. I don't know if there's something where we can meet here before our meeting, if that's even possible. As it is a meeting that's not going to be taking any action. It's just something for discussion purposes.
Dan, I just want to be clear on something you said earlier. You said that the state statute requires a resolution to have the planning board attend the meeting?
It could be a resolution, yeah.
'Cause I just want to make sure we get it right. If it requires a resolution, then we should introduce it, but.
Let me just get the actual wording.
Do we have an agenda for this meeting yet, or is this a little, are we a little soft on what we're going to seek to accomplish?
Mayor, obviously we have an issue regarding affordable housing, and there's many parties that could have involvement. Sarah, the Housing Authority came up
No,
before
Dan,
us.
I just said, do
So
we
it's
have
just
an
a-
agenda? Not wishes and wants. Do we have an agenda?
Well, it's going to be on affordable housing and a future. I mean,
That is the agenda?
yeah.
All right, so Terry, when you invite, when you contact the boards, say the topic will be affordable housing in the borough of Saraville.
And it just, again, it says in here that perform such other advisory duties as are assigned to it by ordinance or resolution of the governing body for the aid and assistance of the governing body or other agencies or officers. So yeah, it would be a resolution that we'd have to, I don't know, I guess it'd have to be a whole thing. Unless they wanted to come voluntarily, because we'd have to go and pass a resolution tonight, which would be open. It is 40:55D-25 A3. So I don't know if anyone has any open days, how they feel about doing it before our meeting.
You know what, I'm pretty open in the evening. Except for the 21st, I really can't miss that.
Anyone have comments,
Thursday.
dates, ideas?
All right, Terry, why don't you call during the week and try to set this up with everybody? All right. Okay, anything else, Council President?
There are a few dates that the council has available, so I don't have to poll the whole council and try to pick dates.
You say day before meeting, right?
The night of the meeting, yeah.
25th?
Yeah.
What time?
We could do it early,
4?
4 o'clock?
I can't do 4 o'clock.
No, I can't do 4.
6.
Now, I don't know if an hour will be enough.
I honestly, I need to just call the district, this is back to school week. That is the week of back to school night, and I am contractually bound to attend the back to school night.
All right.
Is there enough notice for the 18th for next Monday? So we could do the 18th and 19th to get the notice out. That's what I'm asking. That's what I was asking.
Not a week.
Not gonna happen.
So let's do the meeting after.
It will be October what?
3 weeks.
No, this is.
The 10th? Is that the next meeting, right, is,
We had the 25th and we had the 9th.
I don't think it's the 9th, because that's Columbus Day. I
Oh,
think
that's
it's the
right.
10th,
Oh,
right?
well.
October the 10th.
Want to do it then?
That's Columbus Day, isn't it?
The 9th is Columbus Day.
Okay. That sounds great.
Council meetings in town?
I don't know if it's
Yes.
a little late, but what can you do?
Six. Well, the problem with doing it earlier is that we're supposed to have the public here, and unless we're doing it around 7 o'clock. Well, no, then we shouldn't do it then. The whole thing is about this inclusion and transparency for the public.
Do you want to move it to the 16th and start at 7?
What about October 2nd?
I mean, did I miss this part of the meeting of where we were talking about inclusion
October
and
2nd.
transparency?
Yeah, no, let's do it, have it October 2nd.
How about October 2nd, everybody?
What day of the week is it?
It's a Monday.
It's a Monday? It's the
It's
Monday?
off Monday for us.
I'd say it's an off Monday.
That's
How's
doable.
everybody's calendar look?
The 2nd at 7 p.m.?
Sounds good. That'll,
Sure. 6
Yeah.
p.m. is good? 7?
7. It's for the public.
Okay, 7?
It's for the public. All right. Anything else, Dan?
No, that'll be all.
Okay, again, I want to extend a personal thanks to Rob Bruce and his son, I believe it's Christopher. Rob has a long and proud tradition here in the town of service to his country, service to our borough, and I thought for his first time, he did an excellent job. He had a great mentor in Ken Kelly, and very appreciative to the Scouts, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Cub Scouts, the Brownies, our veterans, our police, our fire, our first aid. It was spectacular. The Lions Club showed up as a contingent, and it says a lot about who we are, what we are, and that we choose not to forget. That being said, we'll go to the BA's report. Dan Frankel.
Thank you, Mayor. Authorizing the execution of a public health interlocal shared service agreement with Middlesex County for the provision of health services associated with the Board of Health for a period from January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018. The cost of this agreement is $173,522.75.
Any objections? Next item.
Authorization to appoint or promote Frank Olszewski to police sergeant in the police department effective October 1st, 2017.
Any objection? Next item.
Authorization to promote Amy Noble to police sergeant in the police department effective November 1st, 2017.
Any objection? Next item.
Authorization change order in the amount of $16,350 for VCOM for final verification and acceptance of the public safety radio system.
Next item.
Authorization to promote Matthew Johnson, a heavy truck driver in the Department of Public Works effective October 1st, 2017.
Next item.
Authorization to promote Thomas Farbanek, the truck driver in the Department of Public Works effective October 1st, 2017.
Next item.
Authorization to appoint Veronica McClone to the omnibus driver permanent status in the Office of the Aging effective October 1st, 2017.
Next item.
Ricky, discussion of the physical security assessment of the water treatment. We're going to correct with Danielle on getting the proposal, Wayne. We'll do that in the next day or two, okay? Everybody
Okay.
problem?
Anything else, Dan?
That is it, Mayor.
Thank you. CFO's report.
Okay, the first item I have is the best practices inventory. That's the, distributed annually by the state, and we have to file by October 20th. This year, the questions have been reduced down to, or the items have been reduced down to 25, and we need 20 affirmative actions or affirmative compliance in order to maintain all our energy
Would
receipt
you
status.
and Dan make the recommendations?
It's basically the recommendations are there. The only item that we're probably able to correct going forward for this year to get us into compliance, where we don't lose any state aid, would be revising the tax maps to eventually get to the into a state where they'll be ready for the revaluation when that comes down the road sometime within the next 5 years.
Okay.
Okay. Within the next month and a half, you'll be probably requested by me to pass an emergency authorization to fund the tax map revisions because of the dollar amount involved. And it will be such a emergency resolution that, or an appropriation that will be funded over 5 years, so it won't be a big impact on our local budget. The second item deals also with the best practices inventory. Any municipalities that have separate authorities, they're asked to review their status every year to see that they still continue to serve the public interest, and are they more efficient than any alternative to provide the same service. And I believe, you know, with the Housing Authority and the Economic Redevelopment Agency, the council wants to continue on with them. They have served a good purpose in the past for our municipality. So, but it's an item that has to be brought up at a council meeting. That's a requirement in order to answer yes on that. I have one other item that was not on the list. It came up today. The Water Department, again, needs to purchase some interrogators. That's the gun that gets placed on the item outside the house to read the meters. They need replacement, and the quotes came in, and it's $18,300 for 3 units, and just want authorization next meeting with a resolution to purchase them.
Any objection?
That's all I have.
Thank you. Borough Engineers report.
Thank you, Mayor. First item is the improvements to Hag Street. The borough is pursuing community block grant funds to go through and upgrade Hag Street. Wayne has indicated that more than likely that's going to be approved. He does have money available to start the design of that project, so if no objection, we'll have a resolution authorizing design. Second item is the DOT Trust Fund project. Tonight, you authorized us to prepare the applications. In order to submit, you need resolutions. So we're asking that resolutions be listed on your next agenda. We're currently reviewing the projects with your Public Works Director. Typically, there's one road project, and there's been an ongoing sidewalk project along Bordentown Avenue, so we'll probably submit that. So we'll have those resolutions for next meeting. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
With that, we're going to go into closed session.
Yes, whereas this public body is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, now therefore be resolved by the mayor and council of the Borough of Saraville. The public portion of this meeting is hereby adjourned in ordering that the governing body may meet in closed private session for approximately 3 minutes to discuss the following matters: litigation, and contract negotiation. Following the conclusion of said closed session, the governing body shall reconvene the open portion of this public meeting to consider any matters which may be properly brought before at this time. The nature and content of the discussion which occurs in closed session shall be made public at such time as the need for non-disclosure no longer exists, which relative to the matter to be discussed cannot be reasonably estimated due to the ongoing nature of the subject matter. This resolution shall take effect immediately.
Is there a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Good night, Mr. Robinson. Thank you. I don't have to be up at 4.
I respect the president.
Yeah, we could have discussed that. Pat asked me to come in to explain it. All right, man. Take care, buddy. You take care.
Thank you, John. John, I did have a question for you. Sorry to do this to you, pal. Sorry, John.
Motion to go back into open?
All in favor? All right, this time we're going to open the public portion for questions or comments on any and all issues. All
Sorry.
right, motion to go back into open.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm going to open the public portion for questions or comments. Are there any questions or comments? Being no questions or comments, take a motion to close the
So
public
moved.
portion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Take a motion
Motion to
for
adjourn.
adjournment.
Amen.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone.